Hi, this is Eric from longboxreview.com. Welcome to the show. Today is a very special episode to me because I'm going to be talking about something that is very dear to my comic book loving heart. And on top of that, I get to talk to someone that I very much enjoy talking to and respect and know is a big Legion of Superheroes fan, which is the topic of the day. And I'd like to welcome back to the show Mr. Peter Rios. Hi, Peter.
Hey Eric, how you doing? I'm gonna go by my Legion name, Tap Dance Boy.
Very good. Tap Dance Boy. I didn't even think about that. What would be my Legion name? Inept Boy. How about that?
And I have to that's a little bit of a nod to the Legion of Substitute Podcasters because they always give themselves new names every episode. At least they used to. I'm not caught up, but
Yeah. Yeah. No, actually, when you said that, I thought that's exactly what I thought of is that podcast. And I was actually going to mention them later on in the show when I get to a certain point in my outline.
okay.
But just to let people know, um, so like I said, we're going to be talking about the Legion of Superheroes, and so this is this is a concept from DC Comics that started in 1958. So there's a ton of history and rehistory and revisionist history, reboots and reboots and all that kind of stuff. So this is not a definitive examination of the Legion of Superheroes by any means. This is just two guys talking about a concept, a DC Comics concept that we love, right, Peter?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's um a corner of the DC universe that truly is um it could be contained in its own bubble in many ways, and in many ways it has been. And I love that you don't have to stray too far to read everything Legion. They are usually only in one title, maybe two, possibly a third, or guest stars in another book, depending on the era. And it's one of those corners of the DC universe that is, I think, really truly makes um, DC DC. You know what I mean? Like it kind of fits and only fits within the DC universe.
Yeah, yeah. Although we do there are some analogs
Oh, sure.
to the Legion and other publishers stuff, but maybe perhaps we'll talk about that stuff. But yeah, certainly you are correct about that, which is one of the reasons that the Legion has in the past really well, not even in the past, the Legion really appeals to me for that very reason. So yeah, so I don't know, we're just gonna talk about some of the history of the Legion, some of the concepts involved with the Legion that we like, and maybe talk about some of our favorite aspects of the Legion of Superheroes.
Yeah. I I'm not as well versed in the Legion as I am in the Titans. Um, there are many eras and many years that I've never read. So I'm constantly learning about the Legion, and I'm sure my weaknesses are going to be exposed in this episode, but that's
Well,
okay.
yeah, yeah, mine too. Because same thing, there's huge swaths of Legion history, including a big chunk of the beginning of the Legion.
Hmm.
In their adventure comics run, especially that I am just woefully ignorant of. And then there was a bunch of stuff that came basically after the 5 year later Legion that I missed out on. So
Oh, great. So we basically have the same holes in our Legion
okay,
continuity. So
okay,
we could,
good.
we'll touch on those and then quickly skip over them.
That's right. That's right. So I have Peter. I have my Legion flight ring on, and I am ready to soar into the future, 1,000 years into the future, as we talk about the Legion of Superheroes. So Peter, that just that brings to mind, those old transitions whenever they'd start with Superboy, and they'd show him traveling through time, and then you'd see all the years flutter by in the panel. I love that kind of stuff.
Always and usually always accompanied by rainbow coloring.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was an interesting way to visualize time. In fact, I'm pretty sure I stole that rainbow idea. I used to, I don't know if you did this as a kid, but I used to draw comics, superheroes, my own superheroes as a kid, and
Mm-hmm.
well, not even as a kid, all the way through college even. And I kept it all to myself, and I rarely would show people. And I had a group of time travelers, um, and the time manipulation aspect was done differently than they would with the Legion, but it was still done with the rainbow coloring, probably as a nod to
Yeah.
that. So yeah, it definitely was. I was inspired.
Peter, that sounds like something you should post to your website.
Oh, it's all hacked drawings, and um, I used to take the Who's Who and the Ohatmus,
Mm-hmm.
and when I was young, I used to just trace, as I'm sure most kids did. And then as I got a little more skilled, I could eyeball the artwork, just put it next to me and just sort of copy it with
Mm-hmm.
my eyes. So I never really developed a style of my own. It's always a bastardization of everybody, whoever I was ripping off at that time.
Yeah. I
Um,
I did I did the same exact thing, Peter. This is so
sure,
weird.
we'll have to talk about that sometime. I mean, it has to be. I'm 100% positive anybody that read comics as a kid thought they were good enough to draw, and some of them actually were and went
That's
on to
true.
draw. Look at Alex Ross's early artwork. I mean, they're hysterical. Some of them.
Oh yeah.
If you check out the big mythology book from Alex Ross. So, but some of the characters I actually really really liked. I'm trying to think if I ripped off the Legion at all because I certainly had my Titans analogs, and I had like um, I don't know, there was a Batman and the Outsiders group called the Force of July, and I had my own version of that, and it's all kinds of crazy stuff.
Oh wow. See the things you're saying is just causing me to remember a bunch of stuff that I'd kind of forgotten about. So I did the same thing. I did my own analogs, like you said, both drawing, but also just the stories I used to write. And so I created this entire universe of superheroes, Earth Eric, if you will. And so I had my Titans team. I didn't really do like you're talking about with different teams. Really, it was mostly just a couple teams, but mostly Titans related. But I did have a character on that team who was basically Phantom Girl. So he could phase, and that's
Hmm.
actually that's his name. He was I called him Phase. That was before. Wait, wasn't Phase? Wasn't that the name that they
Hmm.
gave to the Phantom Girl character that was in the '90s Legion book, the
Right.
the
Yep.
Legion book?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Okay, yeah. So that was before that hit. So at least I was original at some point.
Oh, there's a couple concepts that I'm like I said, I'm quite proud of, and I have written entries and timelines. It's a whole. We're so on a tangent. It's a whole other. It's a whole other concept. I mean, I could literally start my own. I could be like CrossGen and just
Yeah.
just totally just start a whole new company if I wanted to.
Well, that was just a lot of fun to me back when I had the time and energy to do such things. So,
Sure, sure.
but you're right. We are getting sort of ahead of ourselves. So let me rein it back in a little bit before we go off on some more tangents. And just start off in case people aren't familiar with the Legion of Superheroes or aren't very familiar with the Legion of Superheroes. Like I said, there's a long, really in-depth, intense history involving this concept and these characters. So I just want to give a brief overview, and Peter, jump right in if I'm missing anything important. This is going to be really brief, though.
Okay.
So, uh, the Legion of Superheroes as a concept, they first appeared in Adventure Comics from DC Comics. This is number 247. And so this was cover dated, I believe, April 1958. And so, Peter, you might know better than me, but I tried to come up basically with some sort of connection, like a timeline connection, some sort of anniversary or anything along those lines. and I didn't for this basically this time period with the Legion, and I didn't really find anything. Although I will admit I didn't look very hard, but I will say that the Legion, since it came out in 1958, is 58 years old this year.
Yes.
So it came out in 1958. It's 58 years old. So I'll take that.
I mean, that's a long that's longevity there.
Yeah.
Especially if you think it's such a futuristic team, a concept, constantly being published in one format or another. I mean, that's something to be proud of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yeah, and I hope we could talk about that a little bit later in terms of the fact that we actually don't have a Legion book, and I know that there was some fan grumbling within the last couple years about that.
Hmm.
But if we get to that, we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Let's see. So that issue, like I said, Adventure Comics number 247, and that number actually does come up a few times in Legion lore. Maybe we'll talk about that too. This is written, but the story was written by Otto. Is it Binder, Peter, or is it Binder? Binder, I want to say.
Yeah, I'm sure there's probably a correct way to say it that's out there, but in my head, I always say Binder,
Okay, me too.
but I'm not sure if that's right.
All right. The art was by Al Plastino, and I noticed, Peter, that many different websites credited Mort Weisinger as a creator or co-creator of some sort. But that issue or that story at least was edited by Mort Weisinger. So I don't know how much Weisinger actually had to do with coming up with this story and these concept that with Saturn Girl, Lightning Boy, and Cosmic Boy. But he does have that reputation of providing the plots to his writers. So I don't know. It's hard to say who came up with what here.
I'm finding that a lot as I dig into a little history. So, as when I dig into the Titans universe and how much Len Wein was a part of the origins of New Teen Titans, and he was the one who said to Marv Wolfman, "You have to have a supernatural character," and that's where Raven came from.
That's right.
And there's a couple other instances of things that he brought to the table early on. Now, obviously, the bulk of the Titans run is Wolfman and Perez, but it was edited by Ween for a long time before he left. And I sort of feel that way about who is it? George Kasdan, I think, from the Silver Age Teen Titans. I think he was an editor or something like that. I might
Mm-hmm.
be confusing that one. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if Weisinger, was instrumental in saying, uh, you know, hey, Otto, Al, we need some youngsters in our books, and then some from the future. Let's do the future. It's the 50s and space and
That's right.
flying saucers and bubbles on a kid's head, and let's do that.
Right, and we ate it up.
Yeah,
Um, let's see here. So, uh, just a couple things about this. So, like I said, number 247, and this is where these three teenagers, like I said, Cosmic Boy, Lightning Boy, and I most people might think of Lightning Lad, and that's because they changed his name after that. I think it was after that first appearance. So I think
sure. Yeah.
I
Mhm.
think in the second appearance, which was what was it, 267, Adventure Comics 267. I thought I had that in my notes and I don't see it. But I think that was their second appearance, and I think by that point they started calling him Lightning Lad.
Right.
Anyway, those three teenagers from the future travel back in time to interact with Superboy and basically invite him to join their club 1,000 years in the future. And then they put him through some trials, and Superboy actually doesn't do very well because he keeps getting distracted by these other events going on at the same time, and it all he gets rejected from the Legion. And that's something I want to talk about just real quick, Peter, because in a lot of the stories that I've read and just some of the ones I just briefly leafed through in preparation for this episode and talking with you, the Legion are real jerks to each other.
Oh, they're such brats. I mean, they're constantly making people. It's like it truly is. You know what? It's not far off from, I guess, what kids probably did. If you wanted to be in, somebody's treehouse club or somebody's cave club. You had to jump a railroad track, or you had to swim in a dirty pond or whatever, and then they laughed at you. And if you survived the laughter and whatever the initiation, they were like, "Oh, now you're our best buds ever."
Yeah.
And it's just like, boy, they do that to him. They do it to Supergirl. They're really obnoxious.
Yeah, yeah, and not only that, but Superboy himself. You would think that after going through that, that he would perhaps be a little more understanding and helpful to other recruits. But there are other stories down the line where Superboy is presiding over these possible Legion additions, and when they don't, measure up, he's like basically, "Why you bother me? Get out of here."
It's just as bad.
It is. It's horrible, but it's still fun. It's all fun in the comics.
Could I put something a little bit in context here with the first appearance of the Legion?
Yeah.
So Action Comics was only up to issue 239 by this point. Obviously, Action Comics is kind of like a colleague of Adventure Comics. They sort of ran along the same way. But Batman was only up to issue 115. Superman was only up to issue 120 when the Legion first appeared. Wonder Woman was only up to issue 97. So this is yeah, not early in DC's history, but early enough, and you could almost sort of feel like the Legion of Superheroes, they just missed being at the tail end of the Golden Age,
Yeah.
uh, which sort of makes sense within their history. Challengers of the Unknown #1 came out the same month, so yeah, it's interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess I hadn't realized that. I hadn't looked at that. So, wow, you're right. That idea of them kind of missing out being like golden age characters
Yeah,
at the tail end, that's just astounding to me.
yeah. Brave and the Bold was up to issue 17. So if you think of
Oh, yeah.
how early, let me see what Showcase was. Showcase was up to oh, of course it. Let me. You know how they do the cover months, and sometimes the cover months don't line up because it's they split certain months. So Showcase was only up to issue 13,
Hmm.
and Flash first appeared. The Silver Age Flash was in #4. So we're like right at the birthplace of the DC Silver Age.
And what better, I guess, heralds of the Silver Age than this future teen team?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if the Flash is the herald of the Silver Age for DC Comics, well, not just DC Comics, but uh, extolling the virtues of the space age.
Right.
Uh, the Legion is like the total realization of that, right? 1,000
Yeah.
years in the future, them living essentially in this utopian future where it's high space fantasy. This is how I described it. And this is actually why I love the Legion. Part of the reason I love the Legion is that it's high concept space fantasy, where science, quote unquote science, and magic coexist. And it's like I said, utopian. And in fact, it's very at least the stuff that I read early on, which was, we're talking late 70s, early 80s was where I came into the Legion. But I also got my hands on as many of those old reprints, like the digest reprints that they did.
Oh,
And
sure.
and I have a few of the tabloid size, the what do they call them? The collector's editions.
The Treasury
Yeah,
edition.
the treasury editions. So I had a few of those, and so I tried to read as much of the old stuff as I could get my hands on. And there's a lot of really Star Trekky type stuff in the Legion that I read. So, and of course, being a huge Star Trek fan that I was then and always, that really appealed to me.
Yeah, I'm not sure why. Well, I guess I do know why the Legion. I mean, if I think you have in your notes about the first issue or something like that. Like, how did you get introduced? When we get to that, I can sort of talk to why it struck me.
Okay. Okay. Just a little bit more history of the Legion. Just real quick, like I said, the three found what we found out later was the founding members. They became the Legion because they saved their founder and benefactor and financial supporter R.J. Brand saved his life, and so he took them under their wing and gave them a bunch of money. And inspired by tales of Superboy, they created the Legion of Superheroes and then recruited various teenagers from across the galaxy to join their club and to go off and save the universe many times. That's kind of the Legion in a nutshell.
Right.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add, Peter?
Have you read? Okay, so we both owned up that we haven't read much of the early stuff, but I have read their first couple appearances. Have you read any of those?
Yeah, a few of them.
Okay, because what I thought was amazing that I didn't know in their second appearance, in their second appearance, they describe the first appearance as being another generation. I think they even say that that was our fathers and mothers of, um, and we're the sons and daughters of that first appearance of the Legion. Do you remember that from their second appearance?
No, I'm maybe I haven't read that. That's totally new to me.
Yeah, because you were right. The second appearance is in Venture Comics 267, and I swear, I can't. I'm not anywhere near to sort of pick that my archive back up or something like that. But in the opening pages, I'll do some research while we talk too, and just to make sure I'm right on that. But they're like, hey, I guess it's another Superboy appearance. He's like, hey, you remember us? And they're like, "Oh yeah, I remember you." And they're like, "Oh no, wait, no, that wasn't us. That was my father. That was my mother." And it's like, "What? Wait a minute. Whoa." And then they quickly just did away with that little bit of because it was over a year later that their second appearance happened. So maybe they thought people would forget, or because it's the future, you just keep jumping futures. I don't know.
Huh.
I'll look it up while we.
Well, and as you were talking, I picked up my Showcase Presents volume with that issue in it, and I haven't found your reference yet about them being descendants of, but they are still calling Lightning Lad Lightning Boy in that second appearance. So, oh
Okay.
wait, no wait, no wait. One character says Lightning calls him Lightning Boy, but then a page later they're referring to them as Lightning Lad. So apparently, continuity was not a big concern back in the late 50s.
No.
Anyway, wow. I guess Peter. I guess I really haven't read that second appearance, so now I really want to go back and read it. But I do have all of the Showcase Presents, which collects a huge chunk of the early Legion history. So I'm
Right.
I'm looking forward to reading those.
Cool.
See, it's amazing. Like I said, there's so much history to this team that you could spend. I think you could probably easily spend years reading through everything and getting to know these characters and everything.
Oh,
So
that's definitely the joy.
yeah, exactly. So okay, so I kind of talked Peter about why a couple of things why I love the Legion of Superheroes. Why do you love the Legion of Superheroes?
Well, I mean, a lot of it has to do with the first issue that I remember picking up. I might have gotten an issue from my uncle, but um, they were like around the Earth War era, the Mike Grell era. And I read them, but I guess because they were my uncle's comics, I guess they didn't feel contemporary. They were from the late 70s, and it was about, I don't know when it was um, that. I don't know if he gave them to me the same year that they came out or if it was earlier or whatever. Anyway, so the first issue that I still have to this day that I remember picking up off the rack at the local mom and pop store was issue 304 from late 83 or middle of 83. And it was issue 304 and it featured the Legion Academy. So it wasn't
Ah,
even it wasn't even an issue that truly featured the Legion of Superheroes, which was kind of weird. So you had Power Boy and Nightwind and Magnetic Kid and Comic Queen and you had this character called Laurel Kent, and I was like,
Yes.
whoa, wait a minute, a descendant of Superman. And it mostly featured Bouncing Boy, Duo Damsel. There was this romantic thing going on between Wildfire and Dawnstar.
Mm-hmm.
I was so blown away about by the scope of the book, how many characters there were, how many plot lines were in it, and then the artwork. And this is the thing that kind of really captured my imagination. Let's see, middle of '83, I was 10 years old, reading this, just about ready to be 11. So um, the artwork by Giffen at this time, this was just before he kind of switched his styles. Um, Keith Giffen was using a lot of Zipatone. Um, he was using, the color artist was using a lot of different color washes and shadows. It was all the setting was all futuristic. Nobody had a sofa that touched the ground. It all floated. Everything floated, and there were monitor boards all over the place, and weird entrances and gravity things, and people having secret meetings in these futuristic tunnels. And the aliens looked weird and interesting. I thought Comic Queen and the other Legion Academy member was Lamprey and Nightwind. They were just beautifully drawn and designed. There were some monsters in it and people arguing with each other, which I guess that didn't change from the early days. Um, and it was very soap opery. It was almost like reading X-Men, where they weren't fighting. My X-Men is the Chris Claremont, John Romita Jr. X-Men. There's a lot of issues where they're not fighting villains. They're just going to a bar, or they're playing baseball, or they're hanging around in the mansion. Same thing with the Legion. They're hanging around in the headquarters. They're at Legion Academy at Montauk Point. And they're just talking and I was like, what is this book? And I was hooked. It looked different from anything else, that my little 10-year-old mind hadn't captured up to that point. And I was a fan ever since.
Oh, okay, Peter. So this is so weird because my first Legion book was I gotta get to it here. This is from Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes. So this is number 254. So that was the very first issue I picked up. And it also did not really feature the Legion. It featured the Legion of Substitute Heroes
Oh, nice.
going against the League of, I think they call them the League of Super Assassins,
Okay, yeah.
or something along the, yeah, League of Super Assassins, from which or sorry, of which Block was a member
Hmm.
who later became a full fledged member of the Legion. So yeah, how bizarre that our first issues were like that. But just to touch on also what you said about the art and just the unusual nature of it, because so issue 304 I remember very well, um, and it wasn't just around that time because I remember some other stuff they were doing earlier on in the series, but during that time for sure, it seemed like that was a very different looking book than any of the other DC comic, well, any other comic really that I was reading because of the art, because of the colors that they did, the way that they did everything. And I thought that really meshed well with the idea of this being a futuristic title.
I'd agree with that. I'd agree with that. Yeah. It was I'm sure if I go and look at everything else that was out at that time and put it all side to side, I would go, "Oh, okay, it's not that much different." But at the time it was for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, and looking back on it after all these years of my vague memory, I still feel that way. But yeah, it if I actually looked at things and compared them, you're probably right. So, any other reasons why you fell in love with the Legion?
I think that's really it. I think just it just the idea of it all and Um, Probably also, I would say, it was a book that didn't touch many of the other DC comics that I was reading at the time, right? So it was again that sort of isolated feel, the pocket of a DC universe that you sort of go, oh, like you're not seeing these characters in Flash, you're not seeing them in Superman at that time. I wasn't seeing him in Wonder Woman. The Justice League books I was reading was they weren't in there. Like you just had to read Legion. That's
Mm-hmm.
it,
Yeah.
and that it made it feel special to me.
Yeah, it was like our own little club of superheroes that we kind of belonged to and nobody else did.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. You mentioned the soap opera aspects of it, and that's also something that I put down as a reason why I loved it. Um, Not that I love soap operas necessarily, but just I don't know the that aspect of the book just kind of is endearing to me, because at the beginning there was a lot of like puppy love between the characters and what was it? I can't remember if it was Shadowlass or no, it was maybe Shrinking Violet. I think maybe it was Shrinking Violet who had a really major crush on Superboy, but that quickly changed because obviously they couldn't tie Superboy down with any one character from the Legion, even though he had plenty of suitors, potential suitors within that team.
Right.
But then you'd have the long term relationships that they fostered in that book, like between Lightning Lad and Saturn Girl and my favorite Ultra Boy and Phantom Girl, and you got Bouncing Boy and Duo Damsel. And there's the host of others too, but it's just I really like that aspect of it. And and there was I tried to find this, Peter, and find out what issue this was. It was in the two teens, I think, maybe earlier. No, it was earlier. I'm sorry, I'm thinking of the Mordru story where the
Hmm.
Legion goes up against Mordru for the first time, I think.
Hmm.
Where well, I say that now, and now I'm second guessing myself. I have no idea when it was. Anyway, the point is, Brainiac 5 is uh, is contemplating one of the other female members. It might have been Supergirl. It might have been somebody else. But at one point, he goes um, basically illogical concerning his feelings about this character. So just that kind of stuff. I just loved it. I don't know why.
I mean, it's comics,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so issue 304 was your first issue, and so were you hooked? Did you start buying the next? Did you get 305 and just keep with Legion from that point on, or
Oh,
did you?
sure.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I was in. I was in hook, line, and sinker. I was collecting all the way through, and then shortly, like almost immediately thereafter, they were doing the whole. DC was doing the whole switch to the Baxter run
Ah, yes.
for both Legion and Titans, and I got a subscription to both. And for some reason, Um, I must have missed the I don't know, like maybe if there was a deadline, or maybe it took a little convincing for my mom to send, the payment in. But the my Titans Baxter Run subscription started with issue 3, but my Legion didn't start until issue 15. So
Oh,
I don't know. I guess maybe I don't know. I don't know what it was. I guess it just took a little longer for me to convince or maybe realize that they were in a second book. So, but eventually I would get all the back issues. But so I went all the way through Legion of Superheroes from 304. They changed to Tales of the Legion. And then when they started reprinting the Baxter, I got a few issues here and there, but since I already had them, I decided to not. I didn't get any more. And then the Baxter run, I was all in on the Baxter run all the way through. 5 years later, Zero Hour, and then I survived about 2 years after Zero Hour, maybe a year, and then that I was done.
okay.
But I definitely was in. I was a Legion fan.
Well, mine was a little. less uniform than that compared to you, Peter. So, like I said, I started with that issue number 254. And then the next issue that I got that I remember getting was issue 267. And that is, it has, I don't know if you're familiar with that, Peter, but it's got Colossal Boy, Bouncing Boy, and Duo Damsel inside. I think it's a Legion cruiser. And Element Lad is out in space and he's losing air. And they're going, "Where's Element Lad?" And of course he's right there. But that's the issue with the genie that shows up. So they fought a genie in the 30th century. But anyway, so then there's like I said, there was that, and I thought, I enjoyed it. It was to me it was like a weird corner of the DC universe that it was like, okay, there's so many characters. It's way in the future. It's not connected to anything, but there was something about it that appealed to me. I think mostly it was mostly the costumes, the colors, the unusual costumes that they had. Um, I'm looking at the Element Lad on the cover here with that that green and black that he had, and Colossal
Oh yeah,
Boy. Even though he's in the classic red and blue, but it's different. He's wearing the head part of it. It only covers. It's like a headband, but it's connected to I don't know how to describe it, but it's connected in the back, to the rest of his costume.
right.
It's just bizarre,
It's kind of like
bizarre.
a Kid Flash cowl where the hair is
Oh
exposed.
yeah, yeah, exactly. There you go. Except it that doesn't come down to cover his face. It's just on his forehead, which
Oh right, yeah, it's like a headband. Yeah.
yeah. And then let's see what I got so many notes here. Oh yeah. So on that issue, I just went. There was notable to me because there was an appearance of the Guardians of the Galaxy in a flashback sequence. And of course the Jimmy Jane's art. So Jimmy Jane's was
So
one.
Guardians of the Galaxy or the universe?
Did I say Galaxy?
Yeah,
Oh man, whoops,
that's what I was confused. Okay, got it.
wrong universe. Guardians of the Universe, uh, because they're the ones that captured this genie and put him in put. So the genie they were a race of this militaristic conquering race, and so the Guardians being the socially forward people that they were, I guess, instead of imprisoning them in a, I guess, traditional way, put them in these bottles and threw them out into the universe, and they can only be freed if they basically learn humility and would help people. And that's where the whole idea of the three wishes from a genie in a bottle came from, apparently, in the DC universe.
Right.
So I love it when comics do that. And like I said, so Jimmy Janes did the art, and Jimmy Janes did a lot of those issues that I'm talking about here, where I first started getting into it. And you don't hear anybody talking about Jimmy Janes anymore in terms of
No.
art. In fact, I don't know what became of Mr. Janes in his comic book career, but I certainly like the art. I certainly responded to it well.
Yeah.
Um, Unlike when Steve Ditko showed up for a few issues or backup stories in that era. I did not like the Steve Ditko stuff back then. Let's see here. Oh yeah, also in that issue, I mentioned Steve Ditko, and that's where they also told the origin of the Legion flight rings. Like I said at the top of the show, of which I am wearing one, or at least a replica anyway. So that was a good, interesting origin story.
So are you wearing a plastic one or the metal one?
No, I have a plastic one. It's from the I think it was from the 5 year later era when
Okay.
when DC came out with these. I actually didn't get that when the book came out. But I found out about it years later and found this on eBay along with a flash ring that they had done and a Sinestro yellow power ring as
Hmm.
well. So
Yeah.
one of my prized possessions in my collection.
I once bought the metallic one. DC did, I don't know if it was like late 1990s or early 2000s. They were doing these putting out these metal platinum or not platinum sterling silver or like this cheap silver, whatever it is. Like I had a Superman one that had like an embossing or engraving of a Superman symbol, Batman. Bought a Wonder Woman one that wasn't so it was okay. They had a Green Lantern one, but then they had a gold Legion of Superheroes ring, like a metallic gold Legion of Superheroes that I it was like $100 or something crazy amount that I bought.
Oh my
And
God.
then yeah, and then I wound up selling it on eBay.
Well,
But it was nice. It was so nice.
well, now that you mention it, now I'm gonna have to go find it.
No,
So
don't. It's expensive.
thanks a lot, Peter. Okay. Just a few more. Just I wanted to touch on, Peter, if you don't mind. So,
Hmm.
the next one that was really important to me was the DC Special Blue Ribbon Digest number 8. So this is 1981 that I found this, and this it's a white cover with a bunch of Legion members on it, with the members of the Dark Circle surrounding them, and that one is really just notable to me because of the person who bought it for me. I had this uncle, uh, my uncle Tom, and I was staying the night at my cousin's house, and for some reason my uncle stopped at this convenience store. It was the beginning of when gas stations were becoming convenience stores
Hmm.
back in the early '80s. And they happened to have that, and I guess I was eyeing it, and he asked me if I wanted it. I said yeah, but I don't have any money, and he bought it for me. And it's only important to note because this was an uncle who, uh, whenever he could, would incessantly tease me and, quite frankly, harass me.
Oh, jeez.
Uh, in a physical way. He's a very physical guy, and so he would kind of push me around, and anyway, I don't want to get into that, but it was not always a pleasant experience when he was around, but he did this really nice thing for me. And so that particular issue has a special place in my heart.
Nice.
Um, and then finally, so we get to issue number 275. This is May, cover date May 81. This is Ultra Boy as Space Pirate. And so this was the prelude to what then became a few issues later the Reflecto storyline, if you're
Right.
familiar with that
Right.
one.
Hmm.
So that is the issue, 275. That is the issue I decided I wanted to read this book monthly. And so that's that. Then I did. So I started getting it from 275 on all the way up through, let's see, I went through, uh, like you said, the Baxter run, the Tales issues. And as soon as the Tales started reprinting the Baxter issues, I dropped that, through the 5 year later run. I got the first year of Legionnaires,
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, I did the same. Yeah.
and then I dropped off the main book when 0 Hour occurred. And so when they did the reboot, that's when I just decided, the Legion isn't my Legion anymore. It's a different version, and so I dropped it. I then picked it up later with the Mark Waid Barry Kitson Legion.
Oh, okay. So you took a little longer than me to jump
Yeah,
in. Yeah.
yeah, a huge chunk of Legion history, more or less modern Legion history that I am
Right.
missing. But what I've done recently, Peter, is I've gone back and bought, with a few exceptions, I have pretty much the entire run of where I stopped
Oh, wow.
with the Legion. Got all those, got all the Legionnaires except for I think I'm missing one issue still of that. I got the Legion book, that 38 issue The Legion book. I am
Hmm.
missing there was the Legion Lost, I think,
Hmm.
run. I did not get that. And then, like I said, I picked it up with the Wade and Kitson. Got the next volume, which was the before New 52. They did that Legion book. So that was the Legion of the Lightning Saga post Infinite Crisis, I believe.
Right. Right.
And so I got the like 16 issues of that. I'm not sure if I quit that book at that point or if no, I'm pretty sure that's when they rebooted and did the New 52.
Yeah.
But I didn't stick with the New 52 version very long.
Oh, yeah. I mean, going past what I I'm looking at this stuff now and I'm realizing so after Zero Hour, I stayed with the what's called the Archie Legion, the post Zero Hour Legion. I actually stayed through to issue 100 of Legion of Superheroes. So, and then whatever Legionnaires was up to by that point. So, 1997 is when I dropped off, and it wouldn't be much longer until they would cancel it. But I actually did pick it up back again at the end when right before Legion lost, when Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning came on and they did a storyline called The Blight
Mm,
and the Widening Rifts. And this was at the tail end of Legion of Superheroes and Legionnaires. And then that's when you got Legion Lost. And I got that 12 issue series mostly because of Olivier Coipel's artwork. The story was good. Again, like you said, it wasn't my Legion, but the story was good. The artwork was so good. I was really into that miniseries. And then, but for some reason, I didn't follow it. I didn't go into that Legion title that you talked about, that Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning started. And then I remember Jamie D, dear departed Jamie D from Comic Geek Speak. This was before we were doing the podcast. He was like, "You should really read this. The first like major story arc has a character that has never appeared in the Legion before." And I was intrigued, and I was like, "Okay," but I still didn't pick up that series. And then I'm with you. I jumped into the Mark Wade Barry Kitson because of the Titans Outsiders Legion one shot or
yeah,
whatever that was. Yeah,
yeah,
you remember that?
yep.
Yeah, yeah. And I bought all the New 52 Legion. Haven't read them, but I bought them because I'm a Legion fan. I gotta buy it.
Yeah. So you mentioned the Archie Legion, and I actually you introduced me to that term, Peter, because I think we were talking on Twitter about something, and you mentioned the Archie Legion, and I had no idea that that was the nickname for that run because, like I said, I wasn't reading it. So, could you talk about that? Why it was called the see? Because when you said that, I thought I didn't know. Wasn't Archie Goodwin dead by that point?
Yeah, I mean it's officially I think called the reboot era. And because it's rebooted from Zero Hour, right? You have the whole Legion history from 1958 to 1994, more or less intact, except for the Crisis stories, and for whatever they did during 5 years later to replace Superboy, right? As the inspiration. Now, I'm going sort of deep in, so if you don't know the Legion of Superheroes, I'm sort of going deep here, but um, in 1994 when Zero Hour hit, they totally restarted the Legion of Superhero concept, and it was called the reboot era. But those of us, I guess, in the letter columns or wherever, they called it the Archie Legion because some of it had to do with the artwork. Um, I'll look up some of the artists. Their names are escaping me at this point. But also because it was a much in tone, it was a brighter, whimsical, younger tone, and kind of like Archie, where they nothing really bad happened to them, and they were drawn in kind of uh, a little more cartoony ways than maybe you were used to for the Legion, and the Archie Legion just kind of stuck with me. I sort of call it that. um, it's almost like they almost look like they could have existed in Riverdale. It was that's how the artwork sort of struck me.
So is it? I want to make sure I get this right. So who coined the term Archie Legion? Was that something that you picked up on, or or was
No,
it?
that's definitely something that I don't know where Wizard or or maybe AOL was big by 1996, right? So we're sort of right in the heart of all this, and maybe in the chat room or message board or something like that, a news group. but it's meant to be Archie after Archie comics, Riverdale, Jughead, Archie, Betty, Veronica. A lot of it just because of the way I think they were drawn. Like Lee Moder artwork and who's the one that was on Legionnaires? I'm trying to look it up, and it's not coming to me. Um, I'm gonna quick look it up and then.
Well, it looks like oh no, I guess that's referring to the number zero issue that started that version, but Tom McCraw and Stuart Immonen did that issue. I don't, but
Yeah,
yeah, I don't know who.
here it is. It's Jeffrey Moy. If you
Okay,
if you do if you have Legionnaires, Legionnaires started with Chris Sprouse, right? It was beautiful.
okay, yeah.
Loved Chris Sprouse.
Mm-hmm.
But then around issue 18, that's when Zero Hour hit, and the Legionnaires book continued. But then I think were they flip flopping back and forth between Legion and superheroes and Legionnaires? I can't remember. It just became a second title.
Mm-hmm.
It no longer was the same concept as it started.
Right.
And Jeffrey and Philip Moy, I assume they're brothers. Tom Pyre. Just the artwork was just kind of like Archie does DC Comics.
Okay.
I guess
Yeah.
that's why it's stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that was just a weird concept to me. Like I said, but yeah, you're right. I have flipped through some stuff about that time, and I can certainly see why it was referred to as that. But yeah, like I said, that totally went over my head when I first encountered that
Yeah.
that phrase. But um, okay, so let's see here. What else? What else can we talk about with
Let me update you.
Okay,
So,
breaking.
um, breaking news. That whole concept where I said about, the Legionnaires being the kids of the originals,
Oh
it
yeah,
it happens in this is so weird. So let's see. They first appear in Adventure 247, right? And then their second appearance of the Legion of Superheroes, what did you say? Adventure 267, right?
right, right.
Okay. So their third appearance, right? I think it's the third appearance, is Action Comics 267. So not Adventure Comics 267, Action Comics 267.
Weird.
All right. So there's a backup Supergirl story. So this is why I got confused about, going to the future, since Supergirl is in Superboy's future, right? Because we don't meet Supergirl until Superboy is Superman. When she goes to the future, she actually goes to the future of the Legion of Superheroes that Superboy went to. And I'm looking at the backup story, and Cosmic Boy, let's see, she's like, oh yeah, I remember. Um, Superman, Lightning Lad, or I don't know if it's boy at this point. He says, "Have you ever heard of the Legion of Superheroes?" She says, "Yes. Superman has told me how the three youths with strange powers traveled from the world of the distant future of Smallville many years ago when he was Superboy. They invited Superboy to accompany them to the future, and he joined their superhero club. Your Cosmic Boy, Saturn Girl, and Lightning Lad." And then Lightning Lad says, not the ones he knew, although we have the same names. And then Saturn Girl says, we are the children of the three young superheroes who befriended Superboy. We are carrying on the Legion's traditions. How crazy is that?
And so, do you know, Peter, how long did they keep that up before they just kind of melded it all together into one?
I wouldn't be surprised if they dropped it in the very next thing.
Because how confusing would that be to the readers if once everybody started getting together?
Yeah, I mean it makes sense, right? If Superboy visited the Legion of Superheroes, why and normally, the concept is they are 1,000 years in the future. So, like, if you're reading a Legion comic from 1978, it's actually 2,978, right? If you're reading a comic from 2005, it's actually 3005 in the Legion of Superheroes time. So, if Superboy existed in Superman's youth, and then Supergirl is a contemporary of Superman, when she goes to the future 1,000 years, she would go later than when Superboy went, right? So I guess then eventually they did away with that. And whenever you travel to the future, you just traveled to exactly when they you know, when readers were reading it necessarily. It's confusing, I know,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah.
Now I'm wondering when was the first time that we have Supergirl and Superboy appearing in the same time period with the Legion?
Exactly right. So they kind of blow their own trick there, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So confusing. Yeah. So there you go.
But it's a lot of fun to figure out, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So one of the things I want to just touch on too was the I'm afraid I'm going to jump around a little bit, Peter. But so one of the things I love about it, well, because we haven't really talked about this. So the Legion is comprised of, like I said, all these people and aliens from other planets. Well, I guess pretty much majority of them are aliens, right? If I
Hmm.
remember correctly. Uh, but the interesting thing about the Legion, and this is one of the things I love about it, is that every character has to have a unique ability or power.
Hmm.
And it's, I believe it's in the Legion Charter, isn't it? That they can't have more than one duplicate ability on the roster.
Right, right.
Although I don't think it's ever explained why. Maybe it is.
I'm sure probably it's a sort of the same. I know they on the in the bylaws you can't have a power that is derived from an outside source. So like
Oh,
you
right,
can't have a um I don't know, like you can't have a belt that gives you the ability to control gravity. It has to be inherent
right.
within you. So I guess part of it, yeah, why would they shy away? Do I maybe they think it's overkill, or maybe um
Well,
makes the original less special.
yeah, exactly. Because that's one of the things that they eventually introduce into the mythos is that not only do these characters have these special abilities, these singular special abilities, but many of them come from planets where the entire population have those same abilities, which is that's crazy to me
Yeah,
that they do this. So you have a whole planet of cosmic boys, for example, right?
right, right.
Um, the Shrinking Violet, comes from a planet of the Imskians
Hmm.
who can all shrink for some reason, right? But that's what I love about it because so they have this really large cast of characters, and they would go on these missions, and you would get to see every issue you get to see essentially different characters using their abilities, sometimes going through these amazing narrative hoops to explain why they were needed for that mission, or to show that they were necessary to complete that mission. But you get to see them spotlighted in that way, and that's, like I said, that's just one of the things I love.
I also wonder if maybe that's just to keep readers' interest. Keep let's have all these different powers so that when we introduce a new character, maybe the readers, could sort of sit there and go, "Ooh, I wonder what power they're going to have because they can't have anybody else's power."
Well, and that explains too possibly why the Legion has like one of the hugest rosters of any supergroup in comics.
Hmm.
Because yeah, I mean, how many stories can they tell featuring Lightning Lad, for example?
Right.
A guy who just throws lightning around. So you gotta bring in these other characters. But that is the nice thing. As I kind of create or credit the kind of like Paul Levitz and Keith Giffen especially, and that's solely based on the fact that those are the comics I was reading.
Sure. Sure.
So I could totally be wrong, from earlier stories in their history, but it seemed like that they did a really good job of trying to expand the narrative by getting into the personal lives of these characters and the relationships between them, and of course uh, tying all those things together with the various plots that they had going on. The adversaries they had to go up against. So I don't know. Did you Would you agree with that in
Oh,
your
totally.
experience too, or
Yeah. I mean, I think, I mean, if we ever touch on like our favorite whatever, it's very, very, very hard to dethrone the combination, the 1-2 punch of Paul Levitz and Keith Giffen and whoever was inking Giffen at that time. I
Yeah.
mean that the storytelling. I don't know what Paul Levitz was. I have tons of Legion reference material that I've yet to pour over, but I have to, because Paul Levitz did two. He did one writing run, then he went away for a little bit, and then came back. Right, probably right around the time where you said you were all in on Legion.
Hmm.
And then of course it was it was different. It was not one-off issues. It was a little more episodic, a little more continuation, and then you get the Great Darkness saga, and they just basically baptized the Legion of Superheroes with that storyline and said, "Look, this is what we're going to do with this concept. We're going to make them a team, but a family, a large ensemble comic book, whether it was inspired by the X-Men or I don't know. I don't know what it was, why the storytelling switched to being, just something that was going to continue. Subplots were going to go on for multiple issues.
Well, and Paul Levitz was, yeah, let's just talk about that. Paul Levitz was really kind of like, well, again, it's because I was reading these things at that time. At the same time, in fact, I make these comparisons all the time in my own head, but Marv Wolfman was doing that kind of work as well in the New Teen Titans,
Hmm.
where he'd introduce these subplots, and then issues later, many issues later, we'd actually have the main story be that subplot that he introduced, and the Legion was exactly the same way.
Yeah.
And in fact, the Great Darkness Saga is a great example because I think yeah, so it essentially started in issue number 287, but the main storyline starts, 3 issues later. So, not that
Right.
many issues, but they, they would plant these seeds, and some of them would pardon the metaphor, but they would grow really quickly. In some cases, it would take a while to get them up to speed. But
Right.
um, uh, in regards to what you said about Levitz and Giffen, in one of the trades I have, I don't know if it was in the Great Darkness Saga trade that I have, or the Curse trade, which collects the issues after the Great Darkness Saga. There's a introduction by Paul Levitz, and I think it was in that where he talked about his not so great first run on the Legion, and how he was surprised that he was essentially allowed to come back, and he felt this enormous pressure. And maybe I'm conflating that with some other things I've read too, because like I said, I've read a lot of things recently about the Legion. But he does talk about how he felt this pressure to do a good job this time on the Legion,
Hmm.
and he said he was very lucky in that he started off with Pat Broderick on art on those issues. I don't remember what those are offhand. Um, like it's in the 280 something, I want to say. But anyway, but then when he and Keith Giffen started working, that's when the things really started rolling for him in terms of the collaboration between the two and coming up with stuff. So and which of course then ends up years later with Keith Giffen taking over essentially the reins of the book, and then we get
Sure.
the 5 year later Legion.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, they when you talk about comics, the way comics matured. So a lot of times everybody cites like 1986, 1987 as the years that comics grew up, right? Because of Watchmen and Born Again and um, um, Batman Year One and Dark Knight Returns and all these titles that revolutionized comics, but a lot of that was because of the stuff that was going on prior to it. Like Walt Simonson on Thor, John Byrne on Fantastic Four, um, Wolfman and Perez on New Teen Titans, and absolutely Chris Claremont and Byrne, and then Paul Smith, and then John Romita Jr. But a lot of times people don't throw in Paul Levitz and Keith Giffen, and how the Legion. especially when you go to the Baxter run, how it really sort of was one of those books that also paved the way to some different storytelling. And a lot of that's because of collaboration, you know. Some of the best comics are because of collaborators who collaboration between and if you know Keith Giffen, who is a maniac and who has tons of storytelling ability and but is not afraid to shake things up, and he's not beholden to his masters. You know, I mean, he's not afraid to do things that look at Justice League International, look at 5 years later, look at Lobo and Vexed, and he just wants to do work that entertains himself, and um, that that group, that team, is hard to beat on the Legion. I mean, it's as great as some of the later runs are. The, it's sometimes it's really hard to capture lightning in a bottle again with that group.
Well, and wasn't the Legion during that time period of the Great Darkness Saga and later wasn't the Legion, well, obviously because they got the Baxter second volume Baxter book, right? Because they were selling, you know, huge amounts of issues
Oh
like
sure,
the New Teen Titans, right?
oh sure.
So given that, it is really odd to me, you know, that since you mentioned it, that Levitz and Giffen aren't given, I don't know, I guess the due that they deserve in terms of their contribution to comic books as a whole.
Yeah, I mean Giffen. When I went to see him at I don't know if I read it on an interview. I saw him at a panel in San Diego one time where he said the Legion book rivaled. He said Legion and New Teen Titans often fought for the number one best-selling book at DC.
Yeah.
They went back and forth. They would go back and forth, back and forth. So, um, part, a lot of it, I think, just has to do with. I feel like Legion and New Teen Titans, unlike John Byrne's Fantastic Four or Frank Miller's Daredevil, or I feel like those two books have readers who read them in the '80s, who are long-time comic book readers. But when you get new generations of comic book readers, they don't go back to those titles in the way that they might go back to something like Frank Miller's Daredevil,
Mm,
or you know what I mean?
yeah.
Some of that has to do with they never really traded those two titles properly for years. In fact, Legion still does not. I'm fairly certain does not have a complete Baxter Run trade collection. Titans is just doing that. You know, they're up to volume 5 now. So it took, unlike uh, even John Byrne's Superman, even like all that stuff. I mean, hell, we don't even have a trade run of Firestorm from the '80s, and that was 100 issues.
Oh, yeah.
Like so DC's '80s properties aren't evergreen because of that.
Yeah.
Not in the way that Watchmen and all that other stuff is. So I think it could probably have to do with that.
Yeah, I'm looking at this right now, Peter, on comicbookdb.com. Since you mentioned it, it looks like that there were only two trades released almost 10 years ago, uh, collecting the first issues of the Baxter run of the Legion. So
Wow,
yeah, definitely time.
scandalous.
It is. It is. It is.
And I mean, Paul Levitz ran the damn company for how long, and he couldn't be like, you know what, I want to earn some shekels for I don't know. He probably was Jewish, so I don't know. Like, I want to earn some money for whatever for my sons and daughters or whatever, And he's like, I'm going to force a trade collection in there. No, he never did. Well, they did the archives, but that was all the old stuff. But it was never that run. And for me, I as much as I love the 5 years later Legion, like that's the Legion that just speaks to me on a storytelling level. The Baxter run is truly where my heart is because I feel like that's the one that I sort of grew up on. with the Legion. I mean, I collected a lot of the regular series too, but that's the one that just it felt like it was my Legion. And those 63 issues and all those annuals are just phenomenal. Um, in storytelling and in art. I'm not saying they're going to break the mold. They're not going to. They don't. They're not. It's not like the entire run is the Dark Phoenix saga or whatever. But it's when you read it, you're like, yes, this is the Legion. So,
It's funny you say that because when I was looking back at all of the runs of the book, of the title, the concept, it's hard. I can't say book because there's been so many different volumes. Uh, that Baxter run. Now, I did read. I have all of them, but I also I think I dropped it after that first storyline,
hmm
and then of course went back and got them later. But I also came in. I know I came in at the very end when they did the Magic Wars,
right, right.
and I think maybe I had known at that point that they were going to relaunch the book,
hmm
and that's why I got the Magic Wars. The final four issues of that run,
hmm
and then we get into the 5 year later, and that's what I want to talk about next with you, Peter. But when I was, like I said, when I was preparing for this, and I'm making my notes, and and I start listing my favorite storylines and kind of the favorite eras
hmm
of the Legion I have, that version, that volume was not on my list really.
Wow.
And like I said, I think it's probably because for some reason I dropped it early on and
Sure.
came into it at the very end. So I'm to hear you talk about that the way that you did. Now I'm really excited to go back and read. I'm going to start over and read
Uh,
that first, the eye for an eye storyline
uh,
that they did and just go through to the end of it.
yeah. I mean, it was one of those where I don't know. Maybe it was just because Paul Levitz and Keith. I mean, Keith Giffen wasn't on it for long, and then he comes back at the end. But it was sort of like they were allowed to, especially Paul Levitz, have a Legion title that was unencumbered by the previous creative teams, right? So, even he didn't have to pick up plots that maybe, I don't know, Carrie Bates or Jerry Conway dropped, or, it was like, okay, I get to do a number one. Well, this is what I want to focus on. And he does that giant Legion of Supervillains storyline, which is one of my favorite Legion villain groups. And Keith Giffen started the artwork, but then Steve Lytle did some interiors, which he was a cover artist in my mind, and he starts doing some of the interior work, and then you get Greg LaRocque um, on the Legion book, and it also was the volume that felt like like it kind of it touched on DC a little bit, obviously because of the Crisis stuff, um, and it has one of my favorite, if not my favorite, storylines, the Who is Sensor Girl stuff.
Mm,
It's not even like a traditional story like arc, right? It's not like this is chapter one, this is chapter two. It's like this ongoing boiling subplot after Crisis about who is Sensor Girl. And it was the first time I can remember, because not all my friends at the time were reading Legion, but for some reason that storyline resonated outside of the book for the first time. Because I wasn't reading Great Darkness Saga when it came out. You were, but I read that years later. So, who is Sensor Girl? All of a sudden, everybody's like, "Hey, is that supposed to be like one of the theories is that supposed to be Supergirl, right?" Like, and they're like, because she
right?
just died in the Crisis, and we're like, nobody knows, and it was suddenly people were talking about the Legion that weren't reading the Legion, and that was so cool to me, because I could finally share that with my friends who maybe were Marvel zombies or just they just weren't reading Legion at the time,
Mm.
and I don't know, that book just felt like it was pure Legion, and Paul Levitz took it and ran with it, and then Keith Giffen came back on at the end, and the ending of it, even if you never go full past that, you could almost feel like it's a nice little finale.
It now that you mentioned it, I think maybe that's the Who is Sensor Girl thing.
Hmm.
I think that's what brought me back to the book.
Yeah, it's like
Uh,
right around the early 20s, and it resolves like in the mid 20s.
okay.
Yeah.
So I must, that's so weird. I think I think I must have just kind of heard about it, or I saw the covers or whatever, and I started getting them. But I'm trying to remember because it's been a long time now. It's been 30 years or so. But uh, I think the comic book shop that I was at did not. I couldn't get all the issues, and so that then it became a. Um, I could not. I couldn't read certain things. I couldn't just
Sure.
read an issue 5 issues ahead of what I have because I missed a bunch of stuff. Because I know I missed the Universal project, that storyline
Right.
almost totally, and so I didn't want to read like later issues until I got the other issues I didn't have. But I
Hmm.
but I know I read some issues where Sensor Girl was in there, and I remember people talking about it. And yeah, exactly. There was that excitement, that wonder about who this character was, and yeah, that was a really interesting thing that Levitz and was that Lytle at the time that was doing it, or LaRoque?
That was LaRoque by that
Okay.
time.
But yeah, so yeah, that's actually a very interesting aspect of that era of the Legion, because you're right, it was not part of a quote unquote storyline. It was just an ongoing plot thread until they eventually resolved it.
Right.
Um, I was I just to throw it out there, Peter. I was kind of hoping it was Supergirl because I really hated it when she died in the Crisis, but
Yeah.
that's just me. But I won't say who it is.
Right.
But it makes total sense for who it is if you read that volume of the book from the beginning.
Right. Right.
So,
Hmm.
and the other thing I'll add, two more things about this run, Peter, since we're
Okay.
talking about it. I think the reason I dropped it was the Giffen art on it. I did not like it when he changed his style.
Hmm. Hmm.
I do appreciate it now, of course, but
Sure.
back then, going from his the previous volume in the 300s where he's doing the stuff he's doing, and then to go to this how would you even describe it, a looser style.
Yeah. I mean, he actually he started it with in the proper Legion of Superheroes book. Right around this, there was a storyline called "The Omen and the Prophet," um,
Right, that's
which
right.
I actually liked. I was sort of a fan of it, and of that storyline. And Giffen freely admits that he was completely smitten, and then started to just not only just ape this artist style, but he freely admits he was so inspired by it that he basically was copying it. It was an Argentinian artist named Jose Munoz, and it was sort of hard to sort of explain. It's almost like it's just very angular, blocky, thick inking, thick lines. It's almost like bringing like the sensibilities of an indie comic of the time into the mainstream universe,
Mm,
and
yeah.
almost a little noirish. Close up of eyes, right? Like that's the joke. Close up of eyes and very shadowy faces,
Yes.
and you're right. It was something that was probably really abrupt for most people. Again, I didn't necessarily mind it, um, but it did take its toll on some readers.
Yeah. Well, I was young and stupid and didn't realize good art when it shoved itself in my face. So
We all have that. I used to think the same way about oh, I don't even know, like well, certainly Kirby,
yep,
certainly,
yep.
George Tuska,
Hmm.
Don Heck,
Yep.
Carmine Infantino, and then when you grow up and you're like, oh, so
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
totally understandable.
The other thing I want to mention about this run. So this is where this is they did this is post crisis. that's going on here. And so once the crisis happened and they relaunched Superman with John Byrne, and we get all of the changes that Byrne brought to that book. Well, I guess it really wasn't Byrne. We found out later it was editorial, but they took away the whole Superboy aspect from
Yeah.
Superman. And so without Superboy, how do you have the Legion of Superheroes, who was inspired by Superboy and later when he was Superman, to become these teenage superheroes, right?
Right.
And so what they did the greatest hero of them all story, which was 2 issues in the Baxter run of the Legion, and then there was an issue of Superman and also an issue of Action Comics, I believe.
Hmm.
And so this was the explanation of how we could have Superboy in the Legion of Superheroes and still have this redone version of Superman where there was no Superboy.
Right.
And you get and basically the if people aren't familiar with it, it involves the Time Trapper, which is one of the great villains of the Legion, and we need to talk about all the villains at some point here, Peter. Uh, who created a pocket universe in which whenever the Legion went back in time, they did not go back to the main DC universe past to them. They went into this pocket universe where Superboy did exist. And so during that whole story, basically, well, in the end, Superboy makes the sacrifice and ends up dying for his actions to save everybody. And I always just I really like that story, and that is those 2 issues. Once I heard about those were 2 issues that I did. I think maybe that's when I picked it up, Peter. Again, is when I got those 2 issues. So I came back to the title at that point, and through the end of it.
Right.
So
Right.
I missed the 20s essentially and the early 30s on that. But that was people don't like to talk about getting emotional with things, but I have to admit I got a little emotional with that storyline because I loved Superboy. That's what drew me in. That issue of Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes 254, because Superboy is plastered right there, front and center on that cover, right, along with all the other characters around it. But there's Superboy, and I was big into reading Superman comics and Superboy, and I just loved it. So that's what drew me to the Legion in the first place. So then years later they had this storyline where Superboy saves everybody and ends up dying, for it, and has repercussions down the road too with some characters. It was just a great little 4 issue story that was part of this volume. So
Yeah. Yeah. And that issue, that issue 38, where he dies, sporting a Bill Sienkiewicz cover, um, where like you can barely make out the Legionnaires
oh right,
in like a sunset type
yes,
aspect. Yeah.
yeah.
That I don't know if it still goes for a little bit of money, but it used to be very expensive to get.
Mm, yeah, that's good stuff. Okay, so well, okay, let's since we're talking about our runs and stories, what are some of your favorite Legion storylines, I guess?
Well, like I said, Who is Sense Girl? I absolutely love. I certainly went back and read the Great Darkness saga. That is one that's it's the benchmark. It's the Dark Phoenix saga of the
Yeah.
Legion. I mean, it's hard to beat. Um, I also really like. I do like the Eye for an Eye storyline. Um, and beyond that, because then it just starts getting less about story arcs and more about the runs. But I will say that the Lightning Saga, which is a more quote unquote recent one, um, and the Lightning Saga, when the original quote unquote the original Legion came back, and also the Superman and Legion of Superheroes story from Action Comics with Earthman and all that. again, more recent, prior to or around the time of Infinite Crisis, I should say. So, well, not recent, 10 years ago. Those storylines are really, really good. Um, but the other one that just gets my juices going is not a storyline. It's more of like a story concept or whatever. It's the Terra Mosaic from the 5 years later Legion run, which starts around issue. Well, oddly enough, it also ends with issue 38, just like the issue where Superboy died in the Baxter run. The Terra Mosaic storyline in um, the 5 years later run starts at issue 25 and around 25, and then it supposedly they say issue 36, but really issue 38, another issue 38, which is like one of my favorite single issues of Legion of Superheroes. It's called The End, if you know which one I'm talking about.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, I mean that whole plot, that whole 12, 13 issues or whatever it is, where the Legion in the 5 years later run finally takes on the Dominators, and just stuff happens. And some of it by the end feels like they're just they're just doing things, um, wondering if editorial will stop them. But Keith Given, he says in an interview, like editorial oftentimes didn't even know what we were doing. They sort of let us go. Now he would have a couple clashes, he said, with Mark Waid about a couple things because Mark Waid was an editor here and there on that book.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, but I mean, he freely admits, he says, what we did in issue 38, I sort of like just snuck under everybody's noses, and but that storyline, ooh, it gets dark, it gets um just stuff happens to the Legion, to the humanity. Um, it's just fantastic storytelling.
Well, I remember when I read that issue. I remember that day that I was reading that issue and what happened in it. And essentially it's uh they destroy the world. Not the
Earth,
Legion, but Earth gets destroyed. And it's not like correct me if I'm wrong, Peter. It's not, if I remember correctly, but it's not like an alien invasion. It's not like this
no,
super villain type situation. It's it's that we use the Earth up essentially, and it just kind of fell apart.
yeah, I mean, some of it is, if you if you trace what's happening in the 5 years later run, I mean, first of all, the moon blows up, and
Oh,
then
right.
remember that, like, right, the moon blows up, so all those pieces are falling to Earth, leveling cities. The Dominators have infiltrated the Earth and separated them from the other united planets. And they decide to blow up all the fusion reactors, I think what it is. But somebody tries to save them, but of course they can't save them all. And so major cities start blowing up.
That's right. Okay.
And you're right. And then eventually what happens is the Earth, it just, it's like a chain reaction. It's almost like Krypton. It's a chain reaction. They do this really awesome thing where they say years ago, every major city built a dome that could seal off the city in case of a major disaster. So they start doming off all these cities, and they start rising in the air. But of course, when they do the dome, they don't allow people in there because they could die while it was happening. Not all the cities are domed, and then as they lift off, some of them, the tech is so old that some of them blow up, and and
Right.
and only I forget how many actually, like 30 some or something, actually managed to survive. And it's this heartbreaking story because they're trying to rescue humanity off of Earth, and not everybody gets off, and it's told in a news, sort of like an article fashion, right? So it's not like panels and word balloons. It's um, told in a narrative format, prose almost.
Hmm.
And it destroyed me when I read it. It was so good.
Well, yeah, it certainly. Basically, I was in shock when I when I read it
Right?
because it's like they are totally messing up the Legion base. The Earth was always the base of operations,
Sure.
and everything. Earth was like the center of the universe, so to speak, in the Legion world, in the Legionnaire larger world, right? And so to do that was just like, what is going on here? It's interesting you said when you compared it to what happened with Krypton in a way.
Hmm.
How weird would it be, or how cool would it be? So you said that was issue 38, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So issue 38, Krypton, Superman debuted in 1938.
Mm.
I'm sure that that was just total happenstance, but
Yeah, yeah. It's just weird. I mean, like, I mean, in Legion history, there's two major things that happen with issue
that's
38. So it's
yeah,
kind
you're right. Now I want to go look at all the issue 38s and see if there's anything going on there.
of, yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah, so yeah, that was a really good one. But that led so that started the whole no, I shouldn't say started, but as I recall, so yeah, we have the floating cities out in space, and wasn't that then the setting of the Legionnaires title?
Right. Yeah. They this younger version of the Legion that was discovered, rebrand themselves as Legionnaires, and they take on some of them take on most of them new names, new costumes, and they patrol New Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And Keith Giffen was gone by this point. The Beer Bombs, Tom and Mary Beerbaum, they were his writing partners all throughout this volume. They take over the book, and from there, to issue 50, and then to the Zero Hour stuff, it's not as cohesive. They
Yeah.
they go on some really weird tangents. I think by that point, um, it was kind of hard to keep the momentum of what they started with issue one going. And eventually, when they got the nod that, oh, by the way, Zero Hour's coming and we're going to reboot this without you, well, then it was like they could do whatever the hell they want. And it, it wasn't as much fun. It wasn't as much, it just felt a little desperate. It felt probably that they weren't, editorial probably was finally looking at them again. And
Ah, okay.
I don't know. I'm just, speculating, but yeah, it was kind of just not the same book again after that.
Yeah, you're right. Because I remember that too. It's like, well, so when they got, and again, I might be kind of mashing things together here in my memory,
Hmm.
but when they did that whole storyline where some of the members of the Legion went undercover and became these other characters,
Yeah,
and Brainiac 5 was an old guy,
yeah,
and all that stuff, that's I have to admit I was losing interest in the title at
yeah.
that
I don't
definitely
blame
by
you.
that point.
I don't blame you.
But okay, so we've kind of talked about we talked about the end of that run. Let's go back and talk about the beginning, the 5 year later run of the Legion of Superheroes, because I know that you and I both love that era,
Hmm.
especially the beginning. And I want to touch on too kind of the dismissal of that era
Hmm.
in later versions of the Legion.
Hmm.
So okay, so when the Legion ended at this is the 1989. So the Magic Wars, we talked about that just real briefly. So that ended, and then uh, Peter, do you know how long between in the publishing timeline did the new volume of Legion debut after that volume the previous volume ended?
Well, the Baxter run, the issue 63, was cover date of August of 1989.
Right.
So the um, uh, 5 years later run was cover date of November 1989.
Okay, just a
So
few
it wasn't,
months.
yeah, it wasn't that much longer. Yeah.
All right. So, despite the fact that it was just a few months in publication time, they did do, and hence our reference to 5 years later. They jumped 5 years into the future, and so there's this gap of time missing in Legion storytelling
It's the
between
very it's the very first page of the first issue. It says it's a star field, and the very first page says 5 years later.
right, right.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we jump 5 years into the future of the Legion, and now all of a sudden the Legion, which was these late teens, early 20s characters in these colorful costumes, living in this utopian society, and then the Magic Wars happen, and there's this collapse of everything, society and uh,
Economical
economics,
collapse. Yeah.
exactly. Uh, but we miss all that messy. Well, not all of it. We miss a lot of that messy stuff that happens, at the beginning of a collapse like that. And 5 years later, the Legion is not even really around. If it is, no, it's not at all at the beginning of that next volume. But Chameleon Boy, Reap Daggle, wants to get the band back together essentially, and he goes off to, and that's the first few issues. He goes off to collect or recruit, you know, the guys and the gals of the Legion, as many as he can. And along the way, some adventures happen, and then we get this wonderful take on. Well, I think it's wonderful. Roxas,
Mm-hmm.
who has been employed by it's the Dominators, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
And so Roxas starts killing off, or trying to kill off anyway, members of the Legion. And so, like I said, so Roxas was this old Legion. I don't know how, if we do this, if I keep doing this, we'll be here for 400 hours, Peter. But Roxas was this old, uh, is Element Lad, right? He was an old adversary of Element Lad's.
Right. Right. He destroyed Lad's homeworld.
Right. So Element Lad is the last of his kind, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, flash forward all these years, and now Roxas is this crazy guy, crazy murderous dude who wears lipstick and is, I don't know, I don't know how many voices are in his head, but or how, no, that, because that does tie into a previous story. I was gonna say I didn't understand why they went that way, but there is a Legion story, I think in the 200s of the original run,
Mm-hmm.
where Roxas, it does go crazy because he's haunted by the voices of the Traumites.
Ah.
So I don't know if they really played with that afterwards. If he showed up again, I honestly don't know. But to bring it back the way that they did, that totally makes sense now that I'm thinking about it. Um, Along the way, and you probably have to fill in some of the gaps here, Peter, because I'm jumping around and I don't really remember all the
Uh-huh.
details.
Okay.
But along the way, the time trapper comes into it,
Right.
and you have, a lot of people remember and talk about how Superboy punched the universe and changed things during Infinite Crisis.
Right.
Well, before that, Mon-El punched the crap out of the time trapper and totally redid future history.
Yeah.
And we get what is referred to as the Glorith verse
Right.
with the Legion, and you get I forget, Peter, if it's issue 5 or 7 now. I don't remember what number it was, but really early on in the 5 year later run, we get this total reimagining and different take and different focus of the Legion
Yeah.
with
It's
with
it's
with that change.
it's kind of like a reboot
Yeah.
before the reboot. And it really only uh it was issue 8 where they
Okay.
retold the origin.
Right.
I remember seeing ads where they said something like, "You knew the legend of the origin of the Legion of Superheroes, now learn the truth." And it was like,
Yeah.
whoa.
Yeah. So okay, so that's kind of the real brief overview of the 5 year later run. So what about that, Peter, excited you? Why do you like the 5 year later run?
It's the story. It's the way the story is told. It's the perfect. So Keith Giffen often talks about how he doesn't necessarily write scripts. He'll do little thumbnails and story points, outside of the thumbnails, and that's why he was for the 52 weekly series. He actually did the breakdowns of most of those issues, and then the artist would follow pretty closely his breakdowns because his storytelling, he's a true sort of writer artist. He writes as he draws, and his strengths come with pacing. And he loved, for the 5 years later run, he loved the 9 panel grid thing, that was popularized by Watchmen, not necessarily created by Watchmen but popularized by it.
Right.
And so sometimes, on a 9 panel page, there would be 9 different images. On another page, three of the panels up top would actually be all one image, but he's kind of moving, even though it's 3 panels and it's all one scene, he's moving your eye through a room or something like that. So it was the storytelling that he and the Beer Bombs and Al Gordon, who was an inker, but also um, gave some story contributions. Tom McCraw did the same thing. He was the color artist. Um, it was, okay, so at this point, I was reading Legion of Superheroes since, faithfully from like 1983 to 1990, 1989, 1990. 7 years. That's not, I wasn't reading Legion from the Mike Grell era or the Dave Cockrum era. So I wasn't as beholden to the continuity as maybe some people were, especially because I had just gone through the crisis and they had killed Superboy and killed Supergirl. Well, not killed Superboy, but, well, no, they did. The Legion killed him. So, it didn't bother me that these characters were down on their luck, and the universe was a bad place to be. Um, you know, I think some people forget that the reason why sometimes the superhero concept is so strong is especially when it's in the face of adversity or in the face of hopelessness, or darkness. And out of darkness comes the dawn, or
Hmm.
whatever however it goes. So I sort of liken it to, if you liked the reboot of Battlestar Galactica with all of its depth and darkness and misery and woe, but yet the hope that kept driving them. That's what this 5 years later Legion was for me.
Oh,
Um, it was the promise that they were going to come together again, and they did in their own unique way. And then, as I said, it kind of hit a point where that bleakness became the only thing we were going to get, and there
right.
wasn't. I don't think they ever truly really hit. They had a high point around issue 13, and um, which is the fabulous State of the Union issue. Um, and there were the Matter Eater Lad solo issues were so funny and so bright, and but I don't think they ever truly got um, the payoff that we wanted from those early issues. But I was okay with that because they were trying to do something with the Legion to generate readers. And unfortunately, I think, when you're reading a book and it's Cosmic Boy and Chameleon Boy and Ultra Boy and, Shrinking Violet, when you're reading this, it's Rock and Reap and Joe and Vi, and you're like, well, who the hell are they if you're not familiar with the Legion?
Right. Right.
But I liked that.
Yep.
It's everything I loved about the Titans, that they called each other Wally and Dick and Vic and Gar. And in this book, you had to have an encyclopedia next to you sometimes. And it was a book that I think it was ahead of its time. I really do. I think it was ahead of its time in its storytelling. Um, this is this is pre-Starman. This is pre-Christopher Priest on Black Panther. This is pre-Kevin Smith on Daredevil and 52 and all that stuff. I mean, it was the book that inspired Andy Schmidt and Bill Roseman to do Annihilation at Marvel, and they said we want Keith Giffen because of his amazing storytelling. So,
I did not
um,
know that.
yeah, yeah. When we interviewed him during Annihilation, Andy Schmidt, and he was a huge fan of this run, and he was like, "I want Keith Giffen to write Annihilation,"
Wow.
and Keith Giffen did, and took all those concepts, and I mean, it just the depth to which this book goes. And if you're someone who likes Watchmen and all the text pages in the back, this run did the same thing. And
Oh,
if
that's
you read,
right.
yeah, if you read those text pages, they filled in the gaps slowly and slowly. And that mystery of those 5 years, those missing 5 years, until the source book came out, the role playing source book for 2995, I guess they called it
Yeah.
Legion 29. Yeah, um, you didn't know what happened, and then you got that source book, and it wasn't like they explained it out. They gave you letters and they gave you emails and documents, and you had to like figure out the timeline yourself, what
Yeah.
happened,
Yeah,
and
that's what I loved about it was they didn't spoon feed you any of this. It was the reports and the emails or whatever it was, and
yeah,
you had to glean this stuff yourself. And I remember at a point where they kind of stopped doing that
yeah,
in the main book, and I missed it. I really wanted that because I wanted to know what happened those 5 years that we missed.
right, right.
And I didn't get the source book that you mentioned until actually I think last year after you and I had talked about doing some Legion stuff before, and you mentioned that source book, and I didn't even know it existed.
Yeah, yeah,
So I went out and got it. But so yeah, so just like you, so those are the same things that appealed to me in this book, which is really weird. Now that as we're talking about this, I'm thinking, considering how much I love the Legion in general because of the, like they said before, the utopian nature of it, they live in this wonderful future, and yet here's the 5 year later where things aren't, it's almost dystopian. In fact, it does get dystopian,
sure.
early on in that run. But I think too, you know, art often reflects the time in which it's created, right? And
Hmm.
so we're talking late 89 into the early 90s, and things in America weren't all that great for a lot of people.
Hmm.
And I remember, I remember thinking even, just a couple of years before that, 1987, I worried constantly that there would be a nuclear war.
Oh my God, sure.
Right? Because that was the time period of that, and so I guess maybe other people obviously Giffen and others were kind of maybe thinking along, maybe even subconsciously thinking along those lines, and that worked its way into that volume of the Legion.
Sure.
Um, and so I guess I was responding in that way, but also too, like you mentioned, they were referring to each other by their real names, and that's always something that bugged me. They did a little bit, earlier on, but it always seemed weird to me that when they weren't out adventuring, that they would not refer to themselves by their first names because they were such a social group of kids, of people, and who had been together for years, and yet they still refer to themselves as Phantom Girl or Ultra Boy or whatever. Just
Right,
so that
right.
always seemed weird to me. So when we get that, when it's very personal, and they're coming from coming at reforming the Legion from this dark period in their history, trying to produce something good out of this chaos and woe, like you said, uh, to be a symbol, to be a light in that darkness, that. So that's really what got me excited about that book.
Yeah. Did you start with issue one?
Oh yeah.
See, I actually from about 1988 until about 1990, 91, I was out of comics, and I remember a few things that brought me back. So Tim Drake was just about ready to be Robin. That brought me back because I was like, what the heck is going on? And what else was going on at that time? Oh, I forget. There was other stuff. But one of the other things was I saw this new Legion of Superheroes book. And it was around issues, I'm looking it up, 18, maybe 19, 20. There was this cover. So it was issue 18. There was this cover with
Oh,
just a whole bunch of people with dark circles on their faces. And the Dark Circle is one of my favorite Legion villain concepts. Even though they never really had a truly great storyline, I felt there was something interesting about the Dark Circle infiltrating, the Legion of Superheroes and all of that. And then issue 19 is when the moon blows up and crashes down. And then issue 20 is the Venado Bay issue,
oh yes.
which is like this story point that runs in the background and they keep referencing it. Venado Bay, Venado Bay. It's basically the Legion's Vietnam, if you want to say,
Mm.
or Pearl Harbor, or I don't know, something like that. And I read that was issue 20. I read that issue, and the whole thing is it's what happens between Cosmic Boy and Shrinking Violet. Their two worlds were at war, and you have these Legionnaires on either side of the war. And I read this issue, and they finally, talk to each other, and everything that I loved about Legion prior to this, about the friendships and the romance and the soap operas and the drama, here were two characters crying. In other issues, characters would hug each other. I was reading this book going, holy, what? This is it's not about the costumes anymore. It's about the underlying foundation of who these characters were. And I said, whoa. And I had to go back, and I went back and picked up all the back issues, devoured them over and over again. And then, of course, a few issues later, we get the sequel to Great Darkness Saga, The Quiet Darkness,
Mm-hmm.
that I was again put a spin on superhero major story arcs. And I mean, that was it. I just read and reread those issues. Those first like 25, 26 issues over and over and over again, finding new things, learning a little bit more of Legion history. So I knew who this support, like a stupid Legion reject. I think he was in the Legion of Superheroes. Antenna Boy, who's just somebody who he has so many ears or antennas that he can hear, broadcasts from all over the world. Well, in the 5 years later run, he's a news reporter. And it's like, yeah, you're right. He should be a news reporter. It was like things like that. Like if you didn't know who those characters were, you sort of had to do a little research. But that Venado Bay issue, ah, it hurt my soul how good it was,
Yeah.
and I had to go back, and there were all these new characters, and Cosmic Boy didn't have his powers, and um, Ultra Boy. I always liked Phantom Girl, so like Ultra Boy, was his usual brash self, but he had this new sidekick named Kono, and
Yep.
Furball, who turned out to be Timberwolf, and Brainiac 5 was still his jerky self. And, the more things changed, the more they stayed the same.
Right. Right.
But then to have like Sun Boy, Dirk be a sort of like a front to a pretty face to the Dominator scheme, right? He was their public whipping boy. They would send him out to say, "Oh no, everything's okay." And it was like, yes, of course, vain, uh, egotistical Sun Boy, give him wealth, give him powers, give him sex. Yeah, he probably would do something like that, and just all of it was smart. Um, just smart comic book telling.
Yeah. 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 That issue 20, that Banana Bay issue, is one of my favorite single issues of that run.
Hmm.
So, okay, given everything that you've just said about this book, this run of the book,
Yeah.
why do you think that it's not given it's due these days. And I say that in part because you mentioned the Lightning Saga and the Legion, the return of the Legion through that story.
Right.
And so we kind of get the pre 5 year later Legion come back during that Jeff Johns storyline.
Hmm.
And as I was doing research, it seems like, and I guess I just didn't realize it then when I was reading that the Lightning Saga and then the Superman, the Legion of Superhero stories.
Right.
And maybe just because I forgot and it wasn't that big of a plot point, but uh, based on things I've read, it seems like they have totally ignored the 5 year later era
Right. Right.
these days. So that never happened. So why do you think they did that? Why do you think that the 5 year later run, especially early on, those the first, like you said, 25 issues? I do the same thing, Peter. I every few years I'll go back and just read through those issues, and I don't do that with hardly any. The Great Darkness Saga is one of the best Legion stories, like you said. I don't read that one like I read those issues of the 5 year later run
Right.
again and again. Why doesn't it get the respect that I think it deserves?
Um, I think it does get the respect in a weird way, almost in a way of saying, you know what, let's not touch it. Number one, how do you build your legion off of it if Earth is destroyed? Like, of course, there
That's
could be
true.
some future technology. You terraform a planet, you stick it where Earth was, boom, done. But it's not really Earth. Um, so I wonder if it's one of those that it just was so brutalized and the characters were changed so much that honestly, okay, here's I just thought of this. So in the 5 years later run, we talked about we mentioned that they find a version of the Legion of Superheroes that the Dominators had in their prison, and it's this younger Legion of Superheroes. You could arguably say it's the Legion of Superheroes at their height, with all the major characters. All the characters all the way up, but not including like Dawnstar, or I don't think White Witch was a part of it. So it's like, right around at the end of, I don't know who the last ones that joined the team, like Princess Projector or whatever, but it's the young Legion at their height, right? And it was a mystery of who these characters were. Were they the real Legion? Were they clones? Were they pulled from time? And Keith Giffen had multiple theories. He said he was going to reveal that, yes, they actually were the real Legion. And all the Legion stories that you read from like 1960, whatever, or early 1970s onward was about, they were all clones. That was all you read, Legion stories about clones. So then what he was going to do was have this great conflict, and all these characters would die, and the younger Legionnaires who were now brought back to their proper time or whatever, they would be the real Legion, and the older Legionnaires would go off and be a version of the Omega Men. Like, that was one of his concepts. Um, so he did with that they're called the SW6 batch. By that creative team pulling out what he thought was the purest form of the Legion of Superheroes, and at their height, and pulling them back from time, or if they were held in stasis or whatever, he basically did what Jeff Johns did. Jeff Johns said, okay, when is the Legion of Superheroes the most pure in my mind? And in Jeff Johns' mind, and whoever else was involved on that creative team, they said, well, the Legion was at their height right before the Crisis on Infinite Earths, when it was the Paul Levitz run, when it was all the characters, they have no, they all are in charge of their powers, and it's a semi utopia, and they are the forefront of that universe. So if the Lightning Saga happened around 2006, 2007, he went back 20 years. Keith Giffen in 1991 went back, what, probably about like 25, 30 years. So it's not so far off from what they did, right? If you think about it. And I wonder if it just was easier to go, let's pick them from a time. And they used the crisis as a guide, which makes sense, right? Because apparently Infinite Crisis fixed things that happened since the crisis, and then you sort of go back to it and say, well, the Legion of Superheroes got really royally messed up because of taking that whole Superboy concept away. So let's go back and fix it. And let's just say that's where we're going to pick up from. And, maybe I understand it. I sort of get why they would have done it because it's the easiest to explain, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, not to say that it didn't come up with its own problems because, you know, supposedly they have a Censor Girl, but they still have Karate Kid, and he's wasn't around when Censor Girl was around. He was
Mm-hmm.
dead by that point. So it did create its own little, uh, you know, twists and ties. But I sort of get it. I sort of think of it this way: if I had to go back and pick an era of the Justice League that I felt was the most pure and the most powerful, I would have to go back to the Satellite era.
Mm-hmm.
That included Elongated Man and Atom and Zatanna and Firestorm. And when there was like, I don't know, something like 16 to 20 members, and that was for me the height of Justice League. Or I'm sure people could say it about Avengers, whatever Avengers um, era was their strongest, whether it was around issue 200 or during the Roger Stern stuff, or I don't know, Operation Galactic Storm, whatever. So it's a tough pill to swallow, because I do love, but the other aspect though is that at least they didn't muck around with that era, you know.
That's true.
By ignoring it, it's tucked safely away somewhere.
It's like its own pocket universe.
Yeah, yeah. Sure. I miss Kent Shakespeare and
Yeah.
Kono and Celeste Macaulay, um, that little girl Ivy,
Oh, yes.
um, and all the other new people that they brought in. They were fun, but yeah, I get it, and I'm glad they did it because that's the Paul Levitz Legion of the Baxter Run is my favorite too. So I was kind of glad they did it.
Okay. So, okay, let's talk about this then. Given that the Legion has been subjected to multiple reboots over the years.
So they've had the 0 Hour is called the reboot, right? And that's called the Archie reboot. The Mark Wade one is called the Three Boot.
Yes.
And then I've just looked up because I knew they had a name for the Lightning Saga era,
Mm-hmm.
and that's called the Retro Boot because it brings back the it's sort of like retroactive continuity or whatever they're called. It's called the Retro Boot, which I was like, oh my god, there's so many.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, and okay, since we're talking about this, so there's a couple websites that I have read over the years involving the Legion. One in particular. This is Legion Abstract at Blogspot. I'll have links in the show notes for these things I'm mentioning, but this person, I don't remember his name now. He even Matthew E. He says here. He has a bunch of different names for the various versions and eras. I think he even refers to that he calls it the rebeat Legion. Yeah. So anyway, or at least he's listing it as one of the terms.
Right. Okay.
So, but there's just so many. But yeah. But anyway, so uh okay, so we're in a period where we have no Legion book on the stands.
Mm-hmm.
And as I recall, the version of the Legion that we're just talking about, the post Lightning Saga version, that's the one that we still have, right? The last volume that after the New 52 launched, that's still that version of the Legion, as I recall. Would you agree with that, or are we dealing with a different Legion now?
Yeah, no, it's hard to say. I haven't read the 52 version of it, but the idea, yes, is that it is supposed to be the same one from the Lightning Saga with some minor tweaks here and there. And they ended the New 52 Legion book um, with sort of this ambivalent ending of which
Right.
Earth that future belongs to. And in an interview, Keith Giffen said, I know you could sort of say we hinted that it was Earth 2, but it could be Earth 1. It could be any universe. We sort of left it open so that they could interpret it later if they wanted to. But yeah, I get the feeling it's this. It's more or less the same.
So one of the things that I'm going to tie this all together, I hope, in my rambling here, but one of the things that I've heard over the years is that part of the reason that the 5 year later run isn't more well loved, I guess, across a broader range of readers,
Mhm,
is that in part, like you said before, about how the characters are referring to themselves by their names and they're not wearing the costumes, and you kind of have to have a reference guide to get to know who you're dealing with on the pages.
mhm.
So it was kind of impenetrable to some readers. So if that's the case for one volume of the book, and then they reboot and then re-reboot and then sort of go back to a previous version of it, but not quite the same version of it, I don't know. Do you feel like that the Legion is just in this awful messy state, or do you think that they have um, got it to a point where it's usable, it's okay, they can move forward with it if they figure out a way to do it to keep the book alive, I guess. So, and that's a whole nother topic in itself. But
Well, here's what I think they should do, and unfortunately, it's what Star Trek can't seem to do. Is they need to evolve. And as much as I love Star Trek and I'm waiting for Star Trek Discovery,
mm-hmm.
it's a little infuriating that they're sticking it in the past of Star Trek's future. They're like, what is it supposed to be between Enterprise and the original series or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I sort of feel like, okay, the series that saved Star Trek outside of the movies was Next Generation. And they did something smart. They evolved the series. They evolved the concept. I feel like the Legion of Superheroes, the next version, should not be about the characters we know
Mm.
because we come at it with too much baggage.
Yeah.
And so do the creators. And I think they literally just need to start again, even if that means you go 2,000 years in the future or 1,000 years beyond, the future that we used to know, or maybe 500 years, or I don't know what. But I think they need to go beyond, and they could have certain characters. I'm sure some of those aliens are long lived, and um, you can have flashback stories if you want. I just think they need to bring back. Okay, this kind of ties back to the beginning of our conversation. The first Legion stories, while they were in the future, weren't necessarily so they weren't futurist, right? Not all the time. They had some interesting concepts. Like every time they would go to Metropolis, they would say, "Wow, Metropolis is bigger than it is in our timeline." He's like, "That's right. Metropolis is the entire East Coast, or whatever it was." And that's okay. I get that. That's probably true. I mean, it certainly happens now where larger cities envelop suburbs and things like that. I get that. Um, some of the time bubbles and things like that. But then they would have silly things like, futuristic ice cream parlor with flavors from around the galaxy. And it's like, okay, well, that's not so futuristic. But I think Eventually, some creators tried to push the future aspect. Certainly, Keith Giffen did in his artwork, and some writers did with the concepts that they were trying to deal with. Mark Waid for the three boot tried to revolutionize the series and tried to say, look, it's this generational thing, and but the characters he tried to update. No longer it wasn't that Colossal Boy could grow tall. It was that his people were tall and they shrunk down to our level, and he did interesting things with their powers to try to update them. And I think that's what you need to do with whatever Legion is going to come next. I don't think this is what they're going to do because we already have had hints so far, but that would be the way to do it for me. Like just bring them back and push it more. Stop trying to appease the hardcore Legion fans because we'll buy the book, but you gotta open it up and try to get new readers because or else it's just going to do the same thing. Legion always goes through a cycle, and it's like they wash, rinse, repeat, reboot, do some stories, and then end it. Reboot, do some stories, and then end it. Reboot, and it's like, but all you're doing is just doing the same stories told 5 million different ways.
Yeah.
So I feel they need a writer and an artist. I mean, I already have it in my mind who I think I would want to write it that probably might have an interesting concept. As far as an artist goes, really hard because I was trying to find some artist that does future well and pushes what you're looking at, and the way Keith Giffen did when I was a kid. Um, but that would be what I would want to see from a Legion book.
Do you want to say who you have in mind for that?
Oh, I mean, I've said it on Twitter a bunch of times. I really would love to see Jonathan Hickman get his hands on
Oh
it.
my God, yes.
He has interesting concepts. He's really good at themes, and I think if if not actually writing the book, I think he could be an interesting consultant, um, and and would maybe push it into that futuristic because I love what he did with Shield.
Mm-hmm.
And I have I managed to get his Secret Warriors in trade paperback for very cheap. And I haven't read it, but I heard that that's a great series. He did a so Top Cow used to do those pilot seasons, and they would put out one issue from a creative team, and then readers would read the issue, and then they would vote on which one they wanted to go to series, kind of like what they do on TV. So he wrote a book called The Core, and it was this really interesting sci-fi futuristic book. It didn't get picked up, but I loved it. And it kind of reminds me of like what I think he could do for the Legion of Superheroes. Like I think he could push it into a new sort of futuristic, I haven't read his East of West, but that book is conceptually, from what I hear, um, different and fun and
Mm,
thought provoking. So
mm-hmm.
maybe he could do something.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear you say that, Peter, because when they were talking about DC Rebirth, and I hoped and hoped that we'd get another Legion book. That's Hickman is exactly the guy I thought of to do it. And I think he was having fun with people like me on Twitter during that same time period because he was kind of sort of
Hinting.
hinting that he might be willing to do it or would be doing it, and so I kind of hate him for that. But yeah, exactly. Everything you said about Hickman, I think it'd be perfect.
Yeah, I think they just. I mean, one of the things I did, speaking of the Top Cow pilot season, I sort of was like, you know what? Just go and get pitches from 5 different creative teams. Let them put out a Legion book, and let us decide which ones we want.
Oh, that'd be
Oh,
so fun.
You know, like in my notes I have down, I kind of would want to see like a Mike Allred Legion of Superheroes. Yeah, that's sort of going backwards because he's an established artist. But when he did that that Future Foundation book, I dug it. I loved. Or no, no, Fantastic Four. I forget which one he
It
did.
was FF. Yeah.
Yeah, FF. Yeah, I loved what he brought to the table on that,
Yeah.
and it was quirky and with the Matt Fraction stuff, it was very scientific-y. It's not a word, but you know what I mean. Um, but no, I think for an artist, they need to scour Tumblr and scour DeviantArt or some humanoids book or some up and coming non traditional American comic book artist that is going to not be beholden to panel borders, is going to try to really think outside the box in terms of laying out the artwork and working with the colorist and make it look like a futuristic book. The that's the Legion I want to see.
Yeah. Oh, if only the possibilities. See, yeah, I totally agree with you, Peter. It should be like that. It should be something that we haven't seen
Yeah.
or we haven't seen much of in a while. Because we some artists have tried to do things along the way.
Well, look at Howard Porter on Justice League 3000 and 3001.
Mhm.
Which is sort of like the Legion book. I mean, if you flip through it or read it, I haven't read all of it, but if you flip through it, it's 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 basically a Legion book
Right.
in secret. But Howard Porter's artwork, he's doing things in that. I'm like, whoa, this is not the Grant Morrison JLA Howard Porter I know, and 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 I like that Howard Porter, but this Howard Porter was really killing it. So I think you need to do something like that where you maybe that's maybe I don't know, maybe that's what they're doing with that Justice League book, just sort of going, look, we got to keep that future going. Um, and Justice League is a hot property, and maybe this is a way to get to the next generation. I don't know.
Hmm. Okay, so since we've now talked about the future of or potential future of the Legion in the DC universe, I want to step back into talking about the past of the Legion. Just a couple things before we go, Peter, because I know I've kept you quite a while here. Um,
Oh no, it's fine. It's been fun so far.
well, I wanted to let's talk about some of our favorite aspects of the Legion. We've already touched on some of this stuff, but let's focus in on a few things here.
Okay.
Um, let's talk about the characters. Who are some of your favorite Legion characters and why?
I have a real liking for Phantom Girl. I said this before. I'm not sure why. I don't know if it's because she's number one, she's one of the longest standing Legionnaire members, her and
Mm-hmm.
Triplicate Girl,
Right.
outside of the big three. Um, she's, I don't know if it's because she reminds me of Donna Troy. I don't,
Ah, okay.
yeah, I don't know if she's the cutest to me. If I love those funky 70s bell bottom pants she wears.
With the holes going up the legs
Yeah.
and arms. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Some of it has to do with what you touched on, was that she was such a popular character that they stuck her in that Legion book from that took place in 1989 and after Invasion. Even though it wasn't supposed to be her, but it was her, but it wasn't her. I don't know, whatever. Um, and I enjoyed her relationship with Ultra Boy,
Mm-hmm.
and I also feel the same way about Shadowlass and Mon-El and their relationship, and the four of them used to always hang out together. The Those two characters are very strong in the Legion of Superheroes. Um, and there's just something about um, I don't know. I Phantom Girl's very level-headed. She's like one of the few Legionnaires that's very level-headed in a way that reminds me of what I always think is the best quality of Dick Grayson.
Mm.
Is that you have the Justice League, and they have the Justice League are icons, and they have to live up to their their icon status. And then you have the sidekicks, but then you have the new ones, the upstarts, the legacy, Kyle Rayner, Connor Hawk, and they come with their own sort of baggage and personalities and whatever. But in the middle has always been Dick Grayson. Like he's like for me the center of the DC universe. Everybody knows him. Everybody trusts their secrets with him because he's never gonna go off the deep end. And there's something about Phantom Girl that kind of speaks to me in that same aspect. So she's definitely one that I would have to put as a favorite character.
Yeah, she's
But,
actually on my list too.
oh, cool. Do you have one?
Oh, I've got many. That's the problem.
Oh, well, I'm gonna. Oh, I was just gonna do one. Let you do one.
Okay, I'll do one. So I actually have it broken down into, for some reason, the kind of like the original
Mm-hmm.
Legion, and then I have some in the 5 year later
Oh,
Legion.
sure, 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 sure.
So, well, my favorite Legion of all time is Ultra Boy,
Oh, cool. Okay.
and really it just has more to do with the fact. Well, a couple things. I love even though he has the powers of Superboy essentially. I love this idea of him only being able to access one power at a time.
Right.
I just think there's so many really good story opportunities with that, and they've sort of played with those a little bit here and there, but not really.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that is his basically what they did with him in the 5 year later run, where they really because that first few issues they really focused on him a lot
Yeah. Yeah.
and established him as this what was that substance that he was kind of running illegally.
Oh, was it the Kono juice? No. What was it?
Silver something? No,
Silver ale.
silver ale. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So he's a smuggler now, but he's still Joe, and I really dug the focus of him in that storyline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He's well. He's Tinya's boyfriend, husband, or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Well, yeah, and that whole thing in the 5 year later, when he thinks she's dead,
Yeah.
and then there was a story that where he was trapped back in time
Mm-hmm.
to in the ancient Egypt times on Earth, right? Because he encountered oh God, Dr. Fate.
Yeah. As Naboo.
Naboo, right?
Yeah.
Exactly, right. And so he ended up falling in love with that demon or whatever it was,
Yeah.
and because she reminded him of Tinya, and all, that was just a heartbreaking issue to me.
Yeah.
That was a
Well, that's
great.
Keith Giffen loves to bring in Lords of Order and Lords of Chaos,
Yeah, that's true.
and he did it for the Magic Wars. He did it for Amethyst and the Gem World because that tied into not only with Mordru, that Mordru was his origin. He was born on the Gem World, but then that the Gem World becomes Sorcerer's World or Xerox or something like that in the future. It's all this
Mm,
crazy stuff.
that's
So
right. Yeah.
yeah, and then you bring in Doctor Fate. Yeah, that's so. Yeah. Ultra Boy's the pirate with the heart of gold, definitely.
Yes. Yeah. And he has a
Yeah,
great tattoo.
yeah,
I actually years ago made a T-shirt which has it's kind of that reddish color that Ultra Boy's costume is,
hmm
and I using Illustrator I created that green bird symbol that he has on his chest,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then made a T-shirt out of that because I love that character so much.
I have to say the in the Baxter run, um, the new group, Tellus,
Yeah,
Quizlet,
Quizlet. Yes.
Sensor Girl, Polar Boy, and Magnetic Kid, I think was the other one that
Yep.
they all joined. And it was really nice to have new characters. And it was also really nice to have alien characters, like truly alien, like
Mhm.
not just Block, who was this big brick, and but Tellus, who was like this amphibious creature, and there was something really cool about him. Quizlet was just, come on, he was just hysterical and fun, and but then to have like Polar Boy have his due, and he eventually becomes a leader of the Legion, and we already talked about Sensor Girl. Um, yeah, that core group when they came in, I thought was a nice little shot in the arm, and they were fun to be. Every now and then they would get their own spotlight, which was kind of fun. So I like that group of characters.
Yeah, me too. So you mentioned Polar Boy. Again, one of my favorites, especially when he came onto the team. but I always seem to go back to the 5 year later run, the Legion of Substitute Heroes, which
Oh
off,
yeah.
often a joke in the book. And then you also had Peter. Did you have that Legion of Substitute Heroes special that they did?
Oh sure. Yeah.
So yeah, again, reinforcing the fact that these characters are a joke, which I never liked. And I could appreciate the humor,
Hmm.
but at the same time, why do they have to keep doing that? And then but then you I get uh, or the subs get the recognition they deserve in the 5 year later run because they become freedom fighters
Yeah.
during that 5 year gap, and they become well respected characters within that effort that they're trying to the
Right.
freedom they're fighting for against the dominators. So I always appreciated that.
Yeah. They got control of their powers and were able to use them offensively, in very interesting ways and powerful ways. They became a threat,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. I like that a lot. Yeah. Um, One of the other, let's see, I'm trying to flip through here. Oh, the Legion of Superhero. The 5 years later is so hard because they're all great in their own way. Like I like Andromeda,
Yes.
Laurel, because it was a holdover from the Laurel Kent character I talked about, and then she becomes Laurel Gand, but she's clearly a Supergirl insert,
Right.
and but fun and powerful and interesting. Kent Shakespeare is he's like a Superman he's like a Clark Kent insert really. Um he was invulnerable and he was very passionate or compassionate, and quiet, and for a big guy, he wasn't boisterous. He was kind of the level head and fun, and I just love his glasses that didn't seem to have a brim. It just sort of just were like these two pieces of lenses that just magically stuck to his face. And then Matter Eater Lad in the 5 years later run is just brilliant. I mean, he's really Matter Tenzel Kem is sort of like Keith Giffen's voice
Yeah.
in that run. And his spotlight issues are some of the funniest comics, and it was nice to see this sort of jokey character become a point of view character for the book,
Hmm.
as opposed to just being like a one-off joke.
Well, yeah, they certainly elevated him, considering that they at one point they wrote him out of the book because they didn't know what to do with a guy who could just eat everything.
Right.
An interesting power, sure, but anyway. Devlin Orion is one of my favorites from that run too.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, I think
Mm.
that's about it. I mean, I have
It's
I have others, but
well, I
I
mean,
could
like,
go on and on.
yeah, it's hard. Like Bounty was such a cool character, especially once you found out who she
Oh
was.
yes,
Uh,
yes,
and I just like the way they evolved the characters. Like they evolved White Witch and they evolved Bounty, and Element Lad sort of had a new status quo, and it's kind of the reason why, again, the reboot of the Archie Legion. Shrinking Violet had such a great character arc from around when I started reading Legion with 304, when she had been replaced and none of the Legionnaires knew.
yeah,
And then she has this total personality change, and she's very pivotal in the 5 years later run. And she has a relationship with Lightning Lass, with Alia. And, that's a strong, well written character. And then you get to the reboot, and she's back to sort of her shy self again. And it was like, oh,
yeah,
no.
yeah. Reverting. Yeah, I didn't like that either.
Yeah.
Oh, Jvon Aaron, the science police liaison.
Mm. See,
Forgot.
I'm more of a Gigi Kuzumana guy.
Well, yeah, she's great too.
She's fun. I like Gigi a lot. She makes me laugh.
Yeah, yeah.
I also like, oh, I totally forgot I wrote this down. Dr. Gimmel
Oh
or
yes. Poor Dr. Gimmel.
yeah. And I don't know if this was made official or not. I don't know if I read this on a website, but so he used to have that satellite hospital place, Medicus One, right?
Right?
Um, and in my mind, and I don't know if this has been confirmed, I can't remember, but in my mind, I used to always think Medicus One was the original Justice League satellite.
Oh,
And I can't remember if I found the confirmation of that or not, or if maybe in one of the books they sort of hinted at, this used to be a station for legends, or something like that. But I used to
cool.
think, come on, it's floating up in space. It looks sort of like it. I'm like, that would be an interesting connection to the past if that's what it is.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Let's. So we're talking a lot about the heroes. I want to touch on the villains,
Hmm.
and we've already talked about some of them. What are some of your favorite villains that have appeared in the Legion over the years?
Yeah, so I already mentioned the Legion of Supervillains, because every great Batman has a Joker, and to me, that's what the Legion of Supervillains are. Um, um, they haven't always had the best story confrontations,
No.
but I'm a big fan of that concept, the yin and the yang, the black and the white, the light and the dark. Um, the Dark Circle, again, not a lot of story to it, but anytime you have like a shadowy organization, on that level that you can never really confront because it's more of an ideological confrontation than anything else. I enjoy that. Um, Beyond that, Legion has had many villains. Trying to think of ones that I really was there aren't many that I that jump to my mind as favorites. I do like when the Dominators and the Kuns. They're kind of fun whenever they the Kuns are kind of like the Klingons of the Legion.
I have that in my notes too.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, it really is true. I don't know. What about you?
Well, Fatal Five is my immediate go-to
Oh,
villains
okay,
for the group.
sure.
Because
Hmm.
you meet the Fatal Five originally in the book, and that's the story I believe where Feral Lad dies.
Oh, right, the Sun Eaters. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and I just like that concept. This small group of villains who are able to take on these this large group of teenage superheroes. So I like that. I like that. Computo is always kind of fun,
hmm,
especially when in that first annual that Levitz did with Giffen,
yeah, yeah.
where they basically Brainiac Five traps Computo into that ball. Well, eventually he does, but Computo inhabits the body of this young girl that Brainiac Five is treating, and that's where you get the new Invisible Lad and all that stuff. But
Right.
um, I just love it. And then later on, that's like I said, Brainiac Five traps Computo in that ball, and then we get a whole new Legion headquarters, and Computo is like the major domo of the
Yeah,
place.
I love that. I love that headquarters, the
Oh yeah,
metallic one with the ship on top.
yeah,
Yeah, that was always my favorite.
yeah. Mordru, the time trapper, all really good villains. With the time trapper, well, that again, it seems like I always come back to the 5 year later. We find out there that without the time trapper, Mordru rises to power,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
so, and the time trapper even tells Mon-El that if you destroy me, Mordru is going to take over, and Mon-El does it anyway.
He was
Because,
like, okay, I'll take that chance.
yeah, yeah. Well, considering what the time trapper did to everybody,
Right.
it seemed justifiable at that time. But the Mordru, Mordru is the magic character, and that's one of the early stories that I read too. That, like I mentioned before, I have one of the treasuries, and I think in that one is the reprint of that first Mordru story where they go up against him, and
Mm,
so he's long been one of my favorites because of that.
right.
And of course, Darkseid. You got what a great villain to go up against the Legion. A really big cosmic level being to go up against the Legion, and of course tie it into the past of DC Comics history.
Right. I liked his disciples.
Oh God, yeah.
because they were all clones of, one of them was a clone of Superman, one of them was a clone of Calabac, one of them was a clone of the Guardian of the Universe,
Yes.
Orion, and oh, and the other one was Lydia Malor, the ancestor of Shadowlass,
Yes.
who then I think we then meet in Legion of Superheroes, or Legion in,
That's right. Yep.
yeah. So that was cool.
Well, so speaking of that, we haven't really talked about the Great Darkness Saga all that much, but and you weren't reading that when it was coming out, correct?
Correct.
So I was, and my good friend Travis, who's appeared on the show many times, he was reading that at the same time too, and we would get the that latest issue of the Great Darkness Saga, and we'd read it together, and then we just pour over it trying to figure out, well, who's this character and who's that character. It really generated, like you were talking about with Censor Girl, it really generated, I felt, within, my small community of people that were reading comics at that time, it really generated a lot of interest in the Legion, in the book. So that was a really cool storyline too.
Well, especially it was one of the earliest um, books to touch on Jack Kirby's Fourth World. Like those characters really didn't bleed out into other titles just yet. And I mean, Kirby was gone by off. He was off of the New Gods and all that by that point. I mean, they weren't. I don't even know if they were even publication. But it took, the New Gods were in like that random JLA JSA story. They were in the Great Darkness Saga, but it really wasn't until Legends where they really became part of the DC universe. So if you were a Kirby fan or a New Gods fan, and you were like, "Oh my God, the New Gods are in Legion," like that had to be huge.
Well, and for me, it was actually my introduction to that whole universe of characters.
Oh, okay,
I
yeah.
had no idea. I mean, well, I guess I knew Darkseid because of the cartoon, the Challenge of the Super Friends. I
Hmm.
think that's where he was in, whatever incarnation of the animated series.
Oh, I think it was like Galactic Guardians. Or,
You're probably right. Yeah.
yeah.
So I was aware of the character, but I don't think I'd really encountered him or the New Gods in comics until the Great Darkness Saga. So that started my interest in those characters.
I did forget one. I do like the Infinite Man.
Oh yeah.
I like they use him sparingly, and they just used him in Justice League United, the Infinitus Saga.
Yes,
Uh,
that's right.
yeah,
In a different way, a different kind of version of him. But yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
That's actually when the New 52 version of the book started. Like I said, I got basically the first arc, and I dropped it because it just wasn't interested. It just felt like the old stuff with a slightly new coat of paint on it, and I
Yeah,
and I wasn't interested in that. I wanted something different. I wanted something more, like you were talking about,
right.
what the future could be. But I came back to it because of that storyline, because I wanted to see what they were going to do with the characters, interacting with the Justice League United characters. So,
Right, right.
and it was okay. I felt like some of the characters weren't behaving like I knew they would behave. So they were merely um, plot points or they were trying, just pushing the plot forward by their actions as opposed to acting in character. So
Yeah.
okay,
Um, I have a few other. Okay. There's two other ones. These are Legion tangents. Um,
okay,
the Wanderers.
yes, okay, good.
I always wanted them to do a really great book with them. Like they could be like the like the Starjammers of the future. But I don't know. They turned them into a funny book, and the concept never really took off. But I was always very interested about them, like the premise of like they were all found dead or something like that, and then
Right.
clones of them or something. That's a fascinating sci-fi concept, and then they never really did anything with them.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And then the Tornado Twins
Okay.
and how they tied them into Barry Allen eventually and Flash, and then of course Impulse and XS, and they took this funny, silly concept and actually managed to give them a place, at least for a little time. And I used to always love in the 5 years later run where they gave Don Allen, they gave him a Flash costume, and the insignia on his chest, instead of the white background, it was like a star background behind the lightning bolt of the Flash costume, and sort of like just to update it just a little bit. And
Mm.
it's literally one panel within the five years later issue it is, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. So I always like the Tornado Twins.
Yeah, they didn't really do much with them.
No,
That they, well, but there's so many characters over the years,
well, sure,
right?
the Heroes of Lalor and
Oh yeah,
way too many.
yeah. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk just real quick. I mentioned before there were other homages to the Legion, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The one that springs to mind, of course, is the Imperial Guard
Oh yeah,
from at Marvel, who's appeared in the X-Men and I don't know other books, but I think they're primarily known in the X-Men because weren't they part of the Dark Phoenix story?
mm-hmm. Oh yeah, yeah. That's the big battle
Yeah,
against
yeah,
the
yeah.
Imperial Guard. Yeah, yeah.
And so there's a tie to the Legion. Not only are they analogs of the Legion, but they were designed by Dave Cockrum, who also worked on the Legion book.
Right,
So
right.
you get all those characters. Are there any others that you're aware of, Peter? I honestly didn't do much research into that. I just
No, I
thought of
mean,
the Imperial Guard and couldn't think of
yeah,
anything else.
they're sort of the biggies. I mean, if people don't know, Dave Cockrum basically designed Nightcrawler to be a member of Legion of Superheroes. Well, not the Legion of Superheroes, to be a member of a futuristic team in the same time as the Legion called the Outsiders, actually.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and then he took that design and stuck Nightcrawler into X-Men.
Hmm.
And then there was another character called, I think, Black Cat, who had the same costume that he would give Storm, because Dave Cockrum, was a designer for that new X-Men group. Um, so for him to do the Imperial Guard, it was kind of like a no-brainer. I mean, um, so yeah, they're featured in X-Men. They're featured in Grant Morrison's X-Men. They're featured in the Operation Galactic Storm storyline with the Avengers. I think they're in like a Starjammers 4 issue miniseries beautifully drawn by Carlos Pacheco.
Mm.
Um, and then Gladiator, what Keith Giffen used Gladiator during his Thanos run, and maybe some of Annihilation, but I can't remember. And that's a concept that I think Marvel just is kind of afraid to use because maybe they're like, we know that they're a Legion ripoff and people are going to think of it that way. And I'm like, no, use them. That's like, there again, it's like you have this whole cosmic backdrop you could use for them as these, they're kind of like a military force. And who knows, maybe some of them are drafted into it and they don't like it. You could do like this whole military drama with them, in space. Um, so I do like them a lot. Most of the other analogs or tangents for the Legion for me come from the Legion cartoon, the Legion on Smallville, and I have yet to read it, but I have that Superboy and the Legion Elseworld story by
Oh, you haven't read that?
no, is it Alan Davis? I know he does the
Yeah,
artwork, but
yeah.
I don't.
I
Yeah, okay,
well, I want to say he wrote it too, but yeah, that's
yeah.
good. I really enjoyed that.
I mean, it's very rare that the Legion gets an Elseworlds, or they certainly have never. I don't right. They've never gotten a um, like a one-off graphic novel or something like that. Like maybe that's what they need. Maybe they need. Batman gets graphic novels all over the place. Superman gets graphic novels, but never the Legion. Yeah,
Legion, they could do Legion Earth One book.
yeah, something. Just so apparently, I think I'm looking at Comic Book DB. Mark Farmer wrote that Superboy's Legion is what
Okay,
it's
yeah,
called. Yeah,
there you go.
which
But
he works with Alan Davis, so
yeah,
as an inker. They probably wrote it together.
Yeah. So you mentioned the Legion cartoon, and there's also been other appearances. I think in the Superman animated series. I want to say,
Yeah.
did they ever appear in the Justice League stuff?
I think so. Yeah, it was Supergirl. Yeah, she.
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
When they were tossing the idea around of doing a like a Supergirl and the Legion
Hmm.
show, which that never happened, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But then we did get the 2 season Legion of Superheroes animated
Yep.
series.
Yep.
What did you think of that?
Yeah, I kind of liked it. I thought there were they tried to make the characters look a little alien. Um, it was skewed for a little bit of a younger audience, but it touched on a few Legion stories that are classics. The second season, when they brought in that Superman X character, I guess it's called,
Yeah,
it was okay. They were touching on the whole Imperious Rec. No, who was it?
Imperiex.
Imperiex, yeah. Um, which was going on in Superman at the time in the comics. They did a Pharaoh Lad Sun Eater.
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
Yeah, that
I think that was in the end of the first season.
right. Yeah, I thought that was actually very good. I was getting emotional at that. That was good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I liked it. I dug it. It wasn't perfect, but it tried. And oh, the one I really like, I think I even talked about it on my Tumblr. I love the Legion of Substitute episode. I think it is so funny, and what they do with the substitute heroes in that one episode. Um, to the point that I think they even make, is it like Rainbow Kid, I think, or the villain that they fight, they make him really flamboyant in a very funny way. It's pretty good. I dug it. I dug it.
Yeah, I wasn't able to catch all the episodes of that show, and I see that they don't have the second season released on, well, anywhere really that I can find.
Uh,
But I'm thinking about buying that first season before it disappears and
yeah,
rewatching those.
yeah,
When it was on, I don't know. It seemed like it wasn't always on at the same time every week
right.
in my area, so I couldn't find it all the time. So I never got into it. But what I saw of it, I enjoyed. You know, like you said, it was skewed more for a younger audience, and that's fine. Um, but having watched a few episodes, well, a few things, you know, you can find a lot of stuff on YouTube sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So there have been episodes on YouTube that I've seen, and I was watching some of those, and my granddaughter Madison, who's big into comics, so she was watching this with me for a little while,
Hmm.
and she came to me like the next day or the next couple days after that and said, "Are you going to watch more of that?"
Oh, cool.
So she was interested in it.
That's good.
And I know that they came out with they had you know a title a comic book based
Yeah.
on that animated series, and I know they traded some of it. They have one trade out for that, so I'm actually looking for that, and maybe I'll even try to pick up the uh, the entire run of that book. But
Yeah, I have a good chunk of those issues. I don't remember how many, but and I haven't read them, but yeah, it's Legion, so I'm like I gotta get it. Gotta get it.
well, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, it was the appearance of the Legion in like the Justice League Adventures book, I think it is,
Okay.
that started me on the path of getting the entire run of that Justice League Adventures. So thanks to the Legion.
Yeah. Did you see the Legion episode on Smallville?
No, I totally missed it.
Okay.
And
It's pretty good.
so what who who in the Legion was in that episode?
It's the big three. It's Cosmic Boy, Lightning Lad, and Saturn Girl.
Okay.
Um, they might have shown other ones, but I don't remember. And then of course I'm fairly certain they show up in the comics in Smallville season 11. But it's a Jeff Johns written issue, and the Legion ring um, has some importance in other episodes. Then,
Oh, okay. Okay.
yeah. So it was
And
good. It was
and
fun seeing a live version of them.
mhm. And speaking of the Legion ring, more recently on the Flash,
Oh yeah,
I heard I didn't actually watch it, but I heard that there, I guess Barry is running through time or something, and there's a flash of a Legion ring.
yeah.
Got me excited when I heard about that. So
Was
hopefully,
it was it Flash or Supergirl? No, it was. Yeah, I guess it was Flash.
I thought it was Flash.
It could. Yeah, yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, that would make sense. He's the only one that sort of zips through time and stuff like that.
But so now that we have the Flash and Supergirl on the same network, along with what is it the what's the other show that's on there? Legends of
Uh,
Tomorrow.
Legends of Tomorrow. Yeah,
Yeah. So, that has a time travel aspect to it.
right.
Um, maybe soon we'll get more
Maybe.
Legionnaires on TV.
Well, there's a there is a Legionnaire coming to Supergirl.
Really? I hadn't heard that. Who's this?
You want me to tell you?
Yeah.
Have you been watching Supergirl?
Yes, I have.
So you know the cliffhanger
Uh-huh.
where the ship comes down, crashing down, and she's like, "Oh."
Oh yeah. And I'm like, who is that gonna be?
Well, I'm fairly certain they've already spoiled it. If
Oh,
you want me
okay.
to tell you,
No, yeah, go ahead.
it's Mon-El.
Oh, of course.
Of course, right? Yeah, of course, of
That
course.
makes total sense.
When they said it, I was like, oh shit, I should have thought of that. I thought it was gonna be, like Streaky the cat
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
you know. But I think what they're gonna do is it's gonna be Mon-El.
Huh. So they're bringing Mon-El and Superman into her show.
Yeah, I mean apparently, I mean unless I read something wrong, I thought, but I'm pretty sure that's what they're gonna do.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah. So
Okay.
they're really pushing the DC TV stuff is really pushing into all facets of DC lore, which is awesome.
See, I gotta get on it. Supergirl's. I watched the first season of Flash. Haven't watched hardly any of the second season. Hardly watched any of Legends of Tomorrow. And I know you've talked about that show on Twitter and stuff.
Yeah,
And
it won me over.
it just makes me want to watch it. And of course, I watched all of Supergirl and loved it. So now that they're all gonna, because they're going to do crossovers.
Yep.
So I might as well just jump on and not do more podcasting and watch more TV, I guess. All right. Is there anything else Legion related that we should mention that you can think of?
I mean, looking at my notes, we one of the things you had on was Legion Tech.
Oh,
Um,
right. Yes.
I had a hard time thinking about it, but I do always love when they used to go to Takron Galtos, the prison planet, and I also liked it's kind of morbid, but Shanghala, the resting
Oh,
place of the Legionnaires.
yeah.
It was nice to, like the Legion has a lot of like locales that you can go to, some
That's
of the
true.
worlds, and but the tech thing was kind of hard, but the
Well,
locations I could,
but
yeah,
you have the Legion cruiser
sure,
and the
yeah,
headquarters. Uh, I love the evolution from what the earliest appearances of Legion where they had those jetpacks and then they became flight belts and then of course they came up with the ring, the flight ring.
right, right.
Just all those. Oh, and they would wear the helmets when they're out in space, but then when they got the Legion flight ring, suddenly they have this invisible layer of a space suit or something.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
I just love the evolution of it.
yeah. And I forgot. I guess I should, you could put the mission monitor board on there.
Oh
That's
yeah,
always
and and
Legion staple.
and everybody's symbol
Hmm.
that they would throw up there, and interlac that when they they talked about it, but then I think Giffen designed it or helped design it when we actually got the alphabet.
I used to be able to read it. Now I'm not
Yeah.
sure if I can read it
Oh no.
anymore, but I used to be able to read it. Yeah.
Yeah. I tried writing notes to my friends in in Interlac, so no one else could read it. Right.
I have a letter in, or no, not a letter. My name is in one of the letter columns of the maybe some of the later one of the later Tales of the Legion of Superheroes books because I wrote in either for
Really?
yeah, I think I wrote in for I don't know if it was a letter or if I wrote or if they named me because of the voting or something. Like because readers used to be able to vote for Legion leaders. But yeah, I'll have to dig it out. I'll let you know which one it is. But it's just my name. It's just mixed in with everybody else's.
That's cool.
Yeah.
The only other thing I want to mention, and I'm going to have to put this in the show notes or something because I cannot think of the titles, but there are two books that I've read in the last year, two series. They're two trades each. And maybe I'll just pause here, Peter, and go to my bookshelf if you don't mind.
Okay.
Let me just see if I can grab them real quick because I do want to mention them. Hold on a second.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, I got them. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I would have done this earlier, but I didn't think about this until we were just talking about it. Okay, so here I got the two that I was thinking of in my hands here. So one was the Hypernaturals, and this is a Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning collaboration
Hmm.
where it's very clearly their Legion, their take on the Legion of Superheroes, and it was who put this out? Boom Studios put this out, and it comes in 3 volumes in trade if you want to try and find those. That was actually a really good story. I really enjoyed that.
That looks cool.
And then the other one is it's called Egos, which stands for Earth Galactic Operatives. This is by Stuart Moore and Gus Storms. This was put out by Image, and that's 2 volumes. Again, it's very reminiscent of the Legion. It's future timeline, this group of characters with powers, but it's definitely a different take than even Hypernaturals in comparison to what the Legion is.
Yeah, that one I'm more familiar with, but
Okay.
Hypernaturals, I mean, I probably remember seeing it, but I don't remember anything about it, so I'll have to put those on my list.
Yeah, and I would definitely recommend Hypernaturals to anybody who would like uh, something having to do with the Legion, or it's a Legion homage that's not the Legion,
Right.
and obviously written and done by Abnett and Lanning. So do they must hold on a second. Oh yeah, they wrote it, and then art is by Tom Derenick and looks like Andre Guinaldo did one of the chapters. This is I'm just looking at the first trade too, so there might be other people involved that I'm missing. Anyway, so uh, those are the only things that I'm aware of that are kind of tied to the Legion or are send ups of the Legion in some way.
That's cool. I'm glad you mentioned that.
And then beyond that, so you mentioned the Legion of Substitute Podcasters,
Hmm.
and so I wanted to recommend some resources for people who wanted to find out more about because we've talked a lot about kind of the general things about the Legion, and we've talked about some of the storylines, some of the issues, but if people wanted to uh, focus on specific things or hear people talk about specific things, the Legion of Substitute Podcasters is one podcast to listen to. There's another one. I think Peter, you actually turned me on to this one, the Super Future Friends
Oh yeah.
podcast.
Yeah, they've pod faded, but
Oh, they have. Okay,
yeah, but the episodes they did put out are great.
and I haven't listened to too many of those. And then there, like I mentioned, more towards the top of the episode, there's a couple websites. The Legion Abstract is the one I mentioned. It's legionabstract.blogspot.com, and there's just a ton of Legion information put out by this guy Matthew. And the other one I found more recently is cosmicteams.com, and they have a section on the Legion, the Justice Society, and the Justice League, and other DC teams, which I found really cool.
Nice.
So if people want to go check those out. And I know, Peter, you have talked about doing something Legion focused, but I also know that you like to go and read stuff from the beginning and move your way through time. So I'm looking forward to that. Whenever you get to that, I know you do the Titans, the Tower podcast.
Yeah.
So uh,
Well, don't be coy. That was something we were going to do together.
well, yeah, but
Because now that we've talked and I realized you haven't read we were going to focus on the 5 years later run.
yes.
And then but now that you haven't read the majority of the Baxter run, it makes me feel like we should start there
Yeah,
because then you could read it sort of fresh and new, and I
that's
could
true.
read, But yeah, I'm one of those stupid people that have to go back and read it all, right? But I don't know. I mean, it's still on my notes in my huge note thing that I keep for the Daily Rios. It's like still there. Legion podcast with Eric. So um, don't don't discount it.
All right. All right. But I certainly didn't mean to step on your toes with this, but I
Oh
just
no,
I
please.
wanted to talk about, I did in a recent past episode, I talked about the new Teen Titans and my love of it, and so I just wanted to do that with a Legion as well. And Peter, thank you so much
Sure.
for joining me in this discussion. This was so much fun.
Yeah.
We are talking. For people who don't know, we're talking over Skype, but we don't use the video part of it. So Peter has not been seeing this stupid grin on my face for much of this time that we've been talking because it's so much fun to share the love of something like this that you
Yeah.
have with another person. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
And there's also, I mean, there's also other source books. There's like three different Legion source books plus the 29.95 one. 29. Yeah. There's also, I'm pretty sure there's a Legion companion or something like Best of the Legion Outpost reference
Oh,
book.
yes.
Yeah, I don't
Is
have that one, but
is that by Two Morrows or is that some other publisher?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I've been trying to look it up, but I didn't find it. Um, so I know there has to be other um, Legion reference material books, because I'm such a sucker for that. Um, so let's see, the Best of Legion Outposts, edited by Glenn Cadigan. So yeah, it could. Yeah, it's a Tomorrow's book. Yep. So that's definitely one people should look for if they don't have it.
Well, God,
So
we didn't even talk about like the who's who in the Legion that DC did.
yeah, Legion Index.
The illustrated index.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's just so much stuff.
Way too much Legion stuff.
All right. Peter, anything else that you want to throw in there regarding the Legion of Superheroes? Oh, I have the trivia question for you after
I
you.
was I was just gonna ask. Yeah.
Uh, okay, so one of the long-standing traditions of the Legion of Superheroes is their battle cry or their rallying cry.
Hmm.
Long live the Legion. Do you happen to know in what issue that first appeared?
Ooh, I do not.
Oh,
That
dang
that
it.
that would
I
be
don't either.
that would be a great yeah, that would be a great trivia question. Wow, no, I don't know. I wonder if it might even be one of those that it didn't come up in the book. Maybe it came up in like letter columns or somebody.
Oh,
Maybe
that's
somebody was
true.
like,
Yeah.
"Hey, long live the Legion." They were like, "We like that. Let's
Yeah.
keep it."
Yeah.
That would be a great thing. Yeah.
I did do a search today before we started talking, and I just could not find as much time as I put into it, I could not find an answer to that question.
Yeah.
But I like that. I like that cry. It's like Titans together. I think it's much better than Titans together, actually. But
Long live the Legion. Yep.
yes, that's right. Exactly. Where's my Legion book, DC? Come on.
And long live the long box. How's that?
That's right. All right. Anything else, Peter, you want to throw in there before we get out of here? Oh, why don't you tell people where they can find you and talk about your great podcast?
I do a podcast called The Daily Rios, thedailyrios.com. Um, don't let the name fool you. It doesn't always come out daily. And then I do New Teen Titans podcast called The Tower, which is all part of the same feed. You can go to thedailyrios.com for all that information.
Excellent. All right. Again, thank you, Peter. I really appreciate you spending the time. I don't know what it's going to be in the edited version that I do, but it's about 3 hours that we've been talking. So, and I know you're on the East Coast, so I appreciate you staying up so late.
Oh, no problem. It's Labor Day weekend. Got nothing to do.
That's true. If anybody out there has, because like I said, Peter and I have barely scratched the surface of the Legion history and lore. Um, so if anybody has anything that they would like to discuss about this information, you can always email me at longboxreview@gmail.com, or you can leave comments at the website, longboxreview.com. I'd love to hear from you and just talk more about Legion stuff. It's so much fun. I don't understand why anybody doesn't like the Legion. Let's put it that way. It's not impenetrable, folks, even though it's been out for almost 60 years and so many different reboots and different versions of the characters and whatnot.
Yeah, if you can read X-Men, you can definitely read
Well,
the
yeah.
Legion.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Anyway, love to hear from you. And please listen to Peter's podcasts and check him out on his website because that's the hub of everything you do. You mentioned you have a Tumblr and
Pretty much, yeah, it all
yeah.
sort of connects back there.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. All right. That is it. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks again, Peter.
You're welcome. Thanks.
And I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye bye.